So this is my chance to both talk with people from US. Just to make sure, Dylan, you are from US. You're not from Canada, because that.
No, I'm not. I'm not a Canadian. Don't associate with me with those people. Okay, I don't appreciate the association. I'm from Maryland. I was born and raised right like 30 minutes outside of Washington D.C.
Perfect. Just to make sure, because like if I say something and then like mid stream we suddenly find out, oh, by the way,
he's wrong guy.
No, I don't. I try not to make content with Canadians. I choose who I associate with.
All right.
Well,
Andrew, you're the merging party here today. So you have kind of brought us all together. I really wanted to do it as well.
It was great. Yeah, it was great. Georgie hit me up, chat, and was like, "Hey, this Dylan guy, he seems pretty interesting. He knows what he's talking about. So can you connect me?" And so I said, "Sure." And then it went from that to, well, then let's just have a conversation together. And now here we are. So absolutely amazing. Dylan's obviously a great on-the-ground journalist who provides literally documentation of units. He does embeds with Ukrainian units, and of course you have Georgie from Ukraine Matters. One-stop shop at home, provides all the latest details and analysis. One of the biggest supporting factors that we have on the YouTube platform is from Georgie from Ukraine Matters. So it's just great to have us here together. People that have been there, myself, I've been there a few times, but Dylan's been there for a year straight. Two years, right, Dylan?
I did 8 months in 2022, 8 months in 2023. I'm going to do 8 months in 2024.
Okay, so basically, yeah, 8. So it's 3 years in a row, 8 months out of the year. That's damn near the whole thing. So he's been on the ground. He's got the information, and I can't wait to share it with you guys today and hear some more details. Georgie, do you have any questions for Dylan, since you two are talking for the first time?
I do, but my chat cannot hear you, so I'm just.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
so. This is when we can say all the terrible things about your community.
Yes, pretty much.
Yes.
Right.
They installed their toilet paper the wrong way. That's the first thing I want to say about Ukraine Matters community.
Okay.
All their socks stink. They bathe every other day and not every day. They forget to floss, and they only floss on weekends.
Sunday floss day.
Sunday floss day, yes.
Yes. No. They hear.
No. It's Friday flossing. Friday flossing.
Friday floss.
The responses are in. I mean, I have I haven't prepared a lot of questions. I always prefer more like conversations. Like Andrew, we're doing with you, discuss latest events. With Dylan, I was like a little bit of a creep with Dylan, because I've been following him like for a long time now, always watching. Always
there,
always watching.
Yeah. When he was like basically crowdsourcing his trip to Ukraine, and he was like, okay, I'm gonna go to Ukraine, but I'm not like gonna go to towards like front lines or anything. And then just a couple of weeks later,
I was at the forward operating position in Zaporozhye. Look, things change quickly. And I guess in my mind, right, when I went over there, it wasn't that I didn't know what I would do when I got to a moment where I was offered something like going to a forward operating position, because people like to say what they would do, if they were put in a certain position. Like I hear people say, I'd kill baby Hitler, right? But if it was 1933, would you kill baby Hitler? Or if it would be back in those times, if you had the power and that specific influence? So I didn't know what I would do once put in that situation. What I do, the Ukrainian version of killing baby Hitler, and actually go to the front line. I know it's not the best comparison, but you get my point. Like, I don't know what I'll do when actually put in that situation, given the circumstances and what fear I'd feel. I also thought at some point someone would just stop me. I thought at some point they'd look at what I was doing. They'd be, this is fucking turn around. Go home. What do? You're a Twitch streamer? Yeah, no, get out of here. But they didn't. And so eventually, when I was given that offer, I was in Lviv, and I was given the offer to go to a forward operating position by a friend of mine by the name of Patrick Hilsman, who did some really good work in Syria and has done some really good work. He's doing work now with UPI. He offered to do an embed with me and two other Polish journalists and aid workers. I took it, and I went to forward operating position, and the rest is history. But originally, when I was talking about, a lot of this was family oriented, where I'm talking to my family, like, don't worry, I'm just going to Warsaw. Well, Lublin is just like, it's near Ukraine, but it's not in Ukraine, and it's protected by NATO. And well, when you think of Lviv, right, it's like the safest place in the country in Ukraine. It's all the way in the west. And look, Kiev's in the middle of the country. It's in the middle. There's so many like different interceptors on the way. And like, look, Kramatorsk and Donetsk, when you think about it, and it just kept going and going and going until eventually I was at the front.
Yeah.
I always wanted to go further. I always felt like I could do more. And so I did more.
I mean, you did crazy stuff, and it's just kind of like a general good introduction as well to my audience that maybe haven't followed your work as much. But you went to some really crazy places. I remember when it was kind of escalating. I remember you coming into Lviv, and I was like, yeah, okay, Dylan's doing great. And then like a video appeared of you like getting shot or like double tapped when you were like very, very early. So you weren't specifically at the front lines at that moment.
I think I was in Mykolaiv.
Yeah. It was there in the south. Yeah.
So it was that was a few months after the Zaporozhye trip. I was with two Polish aid workers again, and this time they were delivering to a dog shelter that was near the front, near the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. The largest nuclear power plant in Europe. This was actually at the same time the IAEA was trying to get into the nuclear power plant, and the Russians were blocking them. And so I was there around that time, and that was also the same period of time when the Kherson counteroffensive was being launched. And at the time, there were so many rumors about the Kherson counteroffensive starting, and it got to the point where you didn't know if it was like a psyop or something, because they've been talking about it for like a month. And once you've got like the 20th article about the counteroffensive going to start any day now, you start to roll your eyes. And earlier in the day, we were filming at this hospital that had been bombed, and we were at one of the trauma treatment centers, one of the most up-to-date modern trauma treatment centers in the south. By the way, I'm hearing echo.
Yeah, I'm too. I think Georgie, I'm hearing Dylan.
It's probably my headphones are a little bit too loud. I'll turn it down.
Okay, I appreciate it.
If you'll have to.
Yeah, I just started noticing it a little bit.
So we were in this hospital, and then when I was there, we heard missiles getting launched in the area and coming in and hitting targets. And we watched as the anti-air was trying to take it down while we were at the top of this bombed out hospital. And we were kind of taken aback. We didn't know what was going on. But then I wanted a steak and milkshake, so we went to a restaurant to get a steak and milkshake because I'm a fat American and I was hungry and it was lunchtime and I hadn't had a steak and milkshake in forever. So I had a steak and milkshake, but I was in there in this Mykolaiv restaurant. I was scrolling on social media and I was getting messages, and it was like, it started, it's real this time. And I didn't believe anybody because I had been given so many false warnings, including by people who are in the know, that I just didn't believe it. And so we started walking out back to this van we had that was carrying our aid, and then I hear an explosion, and it was a shell falling a few hundred feet away in an apartment building, and then another shell, and then another shell. And the Russians, basically, after the start of the Kherson counteroffensive, this is what I believe. I'm assuming their intention here, so I'm take that with a grain of salt. They just started randomly firing on the city center. I think they probably panicked at the start of the Kherson counteroffensive and just started firing wildly, seeing whatever they can do to slow it down. And what that turned into in Mykolaiv was just random shelling in the city center, and we had shells falling pretty close to us as we were hugging the wall trying to take cover. And after like the 7th or 8th shell made impact, and this is at like 2-3 p.m. So this is peak traffic in the city for civilians. And we're in the area between civilian homes and businesses and restaurants. So this is the worst time for them to be sporadically shelling the city center. And so we decided we were going to take a run for it because the shells were just falling too close for comfort. Within it's hard to get an exact estimation, but close enough that us getting hit by shrapnel was a real risk. So we jumped in the van and drove like a mile or two away. And then right when we got out of the van and I like crouched down, I was catching my breath, I was collecting my bearings because, we've been under fire. another shell like fell like 50 to 100 feet away at the new location. And so we had to get in the van again and drive away and go outside of the city, which is eventually what we did. We waited enough to make sure that the bridges weren't being targeted, so we wouldn't, because we didn't want to like cross a bridge that could be targeted. But we left the city and slept outside the city, and it was impossible to sleep that night. I have never heard shelling as heavy and as constant as during the Kherson counteroffensive. The next night, we were across the river from the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. We were watching it as the rockets and missiles and shelling was going on all throughout the night. We couldn't sleep. I remember I tried to count at one point, and I counted 50 explosions in a 30-second time period. It probably didn't help. It was also during a thunderstorm, which made it that much more more unpleasant. And we were just farming out in the field, looking at we were not farming out in the field, but we were out in the field in the van, just sleeping in the middle of the night, seeing the power plant from across the river, watching it all happen. And we were watching explosions not that far away from the plant, man. There were explosions very close enough to the plant to cause concern, since it's the largest nuclear power plant in all of Europe.
What was your emotions during that time? Like, what were you thinking? Because this is your first time experiencing that.
That was my first time experiencing getting directly bombed in that way. Well, directly in the sense that not that they're targeting me specifically, but I'm in the area that they're directly bombing.
Yep.
I had already been chased by like drones, and I had been at places which were then bombed once we left, and we had close calls. In Zaporozhye, it was like that. But you know, honestly, there wasn't enough time, or I guess there was, but I wasn't that scared during. It felt everything sits in after. Because during, when I'm outside of a vehicle and I have my own bearings, I feel like I can do something to try to increase my odds of survival. So for example, when I was in Zaporozhye and I was getting chased by the drone, when I was outside, I felt much safer, even though I still felt very vulnerable and I did feel pretty scared. Because I could lay down, I could like try to make myself feel small, I could move around in some way, I had full awareness, well, that's general awareness of my surroundings. I could look around, I could listen for the drone, and drones sound basically like a little swarm of bees, basically, or like a vibrating phone. And I had more control, and so I could distract myself with things to give myself comfort about my survivability. Whereas if I'm in a van, and I'm just sitting there, we've all seen all the videos of people dying in Ukraine. 90% of them are vehicles blowing up. And the van down there was a soccer mom van breaking down half the time. So it wasn't exactly, it wasn't Fort Knox. Somebody could take a Glock to this thing and kill us all. So when I'm in the van and I can't do anything, and I know that I'm basically in a metal coffin moving around, that's when I feel the most nervous, because it's completely out of my control. And that type of disempowerment in a cage is that was what got under my skin the most.
So many factors when you're out there in person. And you mentioned also as well that I related to was you got further than you expected, right? You thought someone was going to turn you around.
Yeah, I thought maybe when I was entering Ukraine, because I kept checking like what were the requirements to get into the country. But every time, by the way, site chat, gutter chat, if you guys got questions, you can ask questions too. That's my community. I thought like when I would cross the border, even though I double, triple, quadruple checked like all the stuff I needed, it was like, you just need a passport. I was like, bullshit. There's no way all I need to do to get into a war zone is just be like, here's a picture of me. What are you doing? Journalism, I guess. Sure. But that's it. Yeah. That's all it was. They didn't even check my stuff. They didn't go through my belongings. They didn't even search the van I was going. I hitchhiked across the border, actually. I don't know if people know that, but when I was at the border, my original plan was just to walk across the border. That was my original plan. Now that didn't end up working, the walking across the border, because you can't do that anymore. You used to be able to do that. You can't do it anymore. And so I was at the border. I was like, shit. Well, I need a car to get across, but I'm in Poland. I'm not going to like buy a car to go into. What am I going to do? So I started talking to people at the border, and they're like, we'll just stop somebody as they're crossing and ask them to take you in. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And so they just kept stopping cars until one of them said, sure. And it was a couple Belarusian journalists who took me in. I talked to them a little bit about journalism, and they got me across the border, and I had a person on the other side and got in the country.
Wow. You need to like make a movie about that, or a documentary about your entrance into Ukraine. I got through with the NATO convoy. So that's how I got. I was like, hey, if I'm gonna go to Ukraine to report on things, I got to bring them something.
Nah, man, I'm in something called the Zuko arc right now. You watch Avatar: The Last Airbender?
The show? The TV show. You familiar? No, you're too old. You're too old. Never mind. Yeah. That's for my generation. That's Zoomer specific media. Yeah, man, you got Yeah, you got like Tom and Jerry, or you got like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, I'm like Scooby-Doo. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm like. I'm like Scooby. I'm like the talking dog.
But yeah, it
That's
reminded
how
me
everyone's
too,
acts until Fire Nation attacks, I think.
Yeah, true.
until the Fire Nation attacks. But as I was getting closer, when I went to Kramatorsk, and then I went to Mirnograd, which is west of Avdiivka by like not that far. It's not that far away. Yeah, it turned into the initial checkpoints, like when you're by Kharkiv, they're like, you know, they like look at your stuff, but then as soon as you get closer, I just showed my U.S. passport, and they're like, "Go ahead, you're good." Go ahead. If you're a U.S.
Did you ever get stopped over your passport because they just wanted to look at it?
No, the only time they did was like they literally looked at it, saw the U.S. on there, and handed it back and said, "You're good."
Gotcha. I once was coming back from. I spent a lot of my time in villages because I don't really like. I am the worst reporter from a working standpoint to probably associate with, and what I mean by that is, if I'm in Kiev. And Mercado, I think you might know this as well. Most of my time, I'm not really in the city, or a lot of the time I'm not in the city. A lot of the times I'm outside the city in the village because I just enjoy it. It's peaceful, it's quiet. I don't have the hustle and bustle of the city. Now, people would say it's also safer, and it is true that the villages around Kiev are not the target, but we've had a lot of close calls out in the village too, because the rockets and drones come over the villages on their way to Kiev, and that's when the Ukrainians try to shoot them down on the path. And so we've had intercepts like 20 feet away from our back porch, like of like Shahed Iranian drones. But I spend the majority of my time out in the countryside because it's just so peaceful and tranquil, and I just can't stand the city that much. I don't know why.
I agree, though. I mean, like, I think this, when I go back and when I want to stay outside of the city if possible, the only reason I did was.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was a purpose to that story. I just started ranting about why I like the village. But when I was coming back, one of the times I was coming back from the village once, and I take these buses, but they're not buses in the traditional sense. They're just vans that they refer to colloquially as buses. And maybe that's just me being a big soy American, because when I say bus, I mean like, you know, a bus, not a van, but that's what it was. I get in the van, we're heading back, and there's a checkpoint between the village and the main city, and they stop, they go through it, they check all of our stuff, and then they see my passport. And then they take me off the bus, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting chosen out to be taken off the passport. And they bring me off, and there's like 10 guys. And then they start looking at the passport, and they hands it over to the next guy, then the next guy, and then the next guy. And they handed it and passed it around the whole thing. And eventually they gave it back to me. And what I figure out is they're treating it like it's a Charizard Pokemon card or something. It's like a rare collectible. They just wanted to see the passport. They let me back on the bus, and I headed out.
Oh, that is so true. That is very, very as expected.
You're a rare item. That's what you were that day. We probably had like a list of like passports seen, and like yours was, or the US one was rare.
It must have been somewhat confusing to them, because I was also taking a bus from like a remote village into the city. It was probably a weird path that like engage an American.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like seeing an American taking a ride at Marshrutka, which is like the bus, is pretty incredible for a Ukrainian, because, you know, like everyone understand what these buses are like. You know, it's like, it's not really rocket science to kind of figure out that this thing, like, it's like, I think it's only like some duct tape and glue that's holding it apart from falling off certain things. Like, that thing is not really.
Oh, and every single person who drives those buses has the worst taste in music in the world too. Not a single one of them has any idea what they're gonna put on the radio that's gonna give me any amount of like audio pleasure. It's always just screeching, like dubstep music that was like made 25 years ago. I heard Skrillex in one of these fucking vans, man. Skrillex.
Oh, blasphemy.
Jeez, dude. That's old.
Awful.
Shit.
They still love techno over in Ukraine though. They love it.
Oh yeah, every taxi ride, every cab ride you get, it's going. You're playing it, and you usually have kind of like the songs we got on the combat videos playing. Every car, the whole time, you're just jamming. That's why I would take.
You know, I never used to listen to country music until I came to Ukraine, and now I listen to country music endlessly. I love country music now.
To get a break.
I love Blaze Foley. Blaze Foley is my favorite country musician. I love outlaw country. I love Johnny Paycheck. I love Waylon Jennings. And the reason I love these musicians is because when I was in Ukraine, I was so fucking sick of listening to these radio stations of just endless, just techno pop. I felt like I was in a Soviet synthwave music video 24/7. I wanted to get out of it, and so I decided to regress to the most Americoid music genre I could possibly grab, and it was country music, and it brought me back home. And now if I choose my Spotify playlist and I just say, hey, pick me music you'll think I like 60% of it's now outlaw country and folk music. Love folk music.
Do you feel like your identity is changing? Do you feel like you're becoming one?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, I'm 22 years old, right? I'm very young for this business. I started doing this when I literally just turned 21. So going off 20, going on 21, and starting this. I am still in a period of development where my brain is still technically developing. I mean, that doesn't start until that doesn't stop until supposedly 25, but it goes on past that. 25 is like the number they use on average. I'm still developing, but my identity is still developing as a person. And, you know, the war is something that really can have an impact on like how you develop and how you view the world. And I don't really know how to describe how I'm developing, but yeah, I'm certainly still changing as the war goes on. And I don't really think I notice a lot of the changes. When I come back, my family members tell me that I'm a very different person, but I don't really know how.
Maybe your understanding of the world more because you're traveling and you're seeing things. And
they say I'm more calm, which is weird, I think. But I guess it's irrelevant. I guess a lot of the issues that I used to get a lot more stressed about relative to what, you know, the issues I care about now is just very disproportionate. You know, it's very hard for me to get angry at somebody like cutting me off at traffic when, you know, I have other things on the mind and are much important. Things become, you know, you start to examine things relative, and I'm examining my life and the problems I have relative to the things I saw all over in Ukraine.
But talking about the problems that are really, really worrying, since I have two Americans here, finally, let me get this perspective that I can go on. What the fuck is happening in US and how can it be unfucked?
Dylan?
Wait, why am I start? Why can't you start, Mercado?
Listen, no, you want me to go first? All right, Dylan just came out fresh off of multiple political U.S. panels that have been absolutely just destroying. He's been doing amazing, George.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
He's out here representing well the truth and shit. But he's been out
fabulous.
Many big streamers and creator shit. But yeah, it's scary. We got the funding bill. We got the government funded, which is great. I actually saw who's eye patch doing.
Dan Crenshaw.
Dan Crenshaw came out today, and he's been like a part. Is he in the Freedom Caucus?
No,
I think he is. No, he's not.
No, I don't think so. The Freedom Caucus are the ones that are the ones.
The MAGAs.
They're the MAGAs. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Freedom Caucus and MAGA is the same thing. Yeah.
Yes.
The Freedom Caucus was a caucus that was started like late. Like during the Obama administration or like right before the Obama administration, I forget which year, but it was very like super small government, cut the taxes as possible, extremely pro-business. It's considered like the right base of the Republican Party.
Like MAGA.
That's what it was traditionally, but MAGA and that populist bent that a lot of the Tea Party movement relied upon has gone more and more in the direction of MAGA, and therefore the Tea Party has come with it. At least that's how I view it, but I say that as a Democrat, so obviously I have a biased view.
I come from Republican world. He's not wrong. So, but yeah, Dan Crenshaw came out today and said, listen, all right, the border funding, because like the Republicans are killing everything right now. Like we have an invasion. Listen, they're selling it as an invasion of our southern border. The propaganda of it is they're trying to like compare Russia's invasion of Ukraine to like our southern borders being invaded. So
I've heard that speech. Yeah.
But it's still happening. So Dan Crenshaw came out today, who again is on the right, and was like, what are we caring about for real? Our southern border, which again Biden is willing to make what do you call it, Dylan? Where you
compromise
policy. Yeah, he's willing to make compromises to meet these House Republicans' demands, and it's coming from the House of Representatives and like Speaker Johnson. And this is where this energy for like this hardline border policies are coming from. But Biden's even willing to make concessions. This is what I was looking for, concessions to get this deal through. So that way Ukraine can be funded. And so then Dan Crenshaw was like, you want Vladimir Putin to win? Is that what you're trying to say? Because you're not even going to agree with a deal from Biden, which again, the border will get money, 18 billion at the border.
A lot.
And I have my own.
And it's not only it's not only the 18. I'm sorry. I'll let you finish. I don't want to interrupt
you. Good. No. You're actually, I was going to hand it to you next, but I have my own personal solution to the border, which I brought up. Like, Dylan, they got to build these big like Amazon factory style warehouses, federal agents down there. All right. This is my solution. This is my personal solution. Right. Build like, I'm talking with the 18 billion, build like 20 big ass warehouses, however big they are, and send everyone that's on the
surround them with gates. Work shall set you free. I understand. Yeah, where we're going here.
Yeah. However, it's got to go. Make it a deal, whatever. But get it done. All right. Good people in there. Whoever's on the asylum roster. All right. Get it done. Who can stay? Who can leave? And make it like an Operation Southern Invasion. However they would want to.
Operation Southern Invasion.
Yeah, something. Yeah. You can
and if
provide jobs.
Then it sucks.
We'll provide jobs down there. We'll have you got to keep it clean. You got to make sure that there's no trash on the ground. You got to have facilities. Okay, facility workers. Look how many jobs we're creating right now. You got food down there to keep the people fed, so that'll be extra business for small businesses in southern Texas or wherever that want to go and have food trucks out there to feed people or however. Okay, we're creating shit right now, but we're also handling the problem. That's my personal take on it. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but it sounds like a great idea to me to like handle this invasion. But really, again, it's the issue of the asylum and how many people are seeking it. It's a systemic problem with how many people are on there. It's not like the cartel is, all right, wave number 3, Mexicans, here you go, send them. And then they're like going, like sending waves of people there.
They do it like the Wagnerites. They get like 100 of them like near the border. They give them rifles and tell them to charge.
Yeah. All right. So that's all. That's what I got. It's a mess. But Dylan, let's go with the more educated person on the matter.
I don't know if I'd use that word, but I think I think I should give you a background of the position the Republican Party is in to understand why it's doing what would traditionally not be considered a Republican position of, hey, we have a really good chance here to fuck up the Russians, and the Ukrainians are asking for it, and made these commitments, maintain deterrent. What they're doing right now doesn't seem like the traditional Republican position, but what happened is Mike Johnson, who's the current House Speaker, only became House Speaker after a gigantic mess in American right-wing politics. So we used to have this guy called Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker in October of last year, to give you an idea of how long this mess has been going on. So during that time, Kevin McCarthy was getting closer and closer and closer to reaching a settlement on sending aid to Ukraine, passing a budget, and getting that done. But the problem was, they had a very slim majority. They barely won the House in 2022. In fact, the Republicans had the worst performance for an opposition party against the ruling coalition for their first term in like 40 years. They didn't do that well. Traditionally, during the first midterms, the opposition party is supposed to do gangbusters. They barely won the House, and they had a majority of, I think, like 4 to 5. Now the majority is, I think, like 3 to 2, because George Santos was expelled. Somebody else, I think, got sick, and somebody else resigned because they wanted to take some other position. I think the majority is now 2. And so when you're Kevin McCarthy and you want to get through a Republican budget or Republican this or Republican that, and you want to get this stuff done, you're going to have to, in order to get this done, have a pretty united party. But the problem is, in order to become House Speaker, because it was a very kind of divisive race in order to become House Speaker when they first, won in 2021, barely won in 2022, he had to make certain concessions since it was such a slim majority and he didn't want to win any Democrat votes in order to become House Speaker. And one of the things he agreed upon was that all it took was one House member to call for a recall vote for the House Speaker and then start the whole process again of choosing another one. And he agreed to it, thinking he would be able to maneuver around them. A few months later, they eventually pulled the trigger on it when he was about to reach a deal over Ukraine and over the budget. And when he was shot, is shot politically, that is, and taken out of that position, there was a giant scramble for who would take the next position. It was, I know they went through Steve Scalise, and then he was shot down. Then it was Jim Jordan, then he was shot down. Thank God, that fucking psychopath. Then it was Tom Emmer, which I know that he met with Tom Emmer's office around Ukraine aid. He was seen as one of the more pro-Ukraine people, but not super actually from the private meetings that I know Mercado and others have had. And eventually, and he was only destroyed because Trump got in the way and said he will not be the nominee. He's not pro-Trump enough. He's not pro-MAGA enough. Then Mike Johnson was chosen. And the only reason Mike Johnson was chosen isn't because he has a lot of experience. He's actually not that very experienced at all. He's not a senior Republican congressman. He was chosen simply because not many people in the Republican Party hate him. And since not many people in the Republican Party hate him, and that's in part probably due to the fact that he's a new face, so there's not really much to hate, they chose him to be House Speaker because if they don't hate him, then at least that's something to unify around. But the problem is he's not experienced dealing with like a 2-vote majority, and he has to deal with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, and these other people who are the fringe of the parties who don't want to do any compromise. That's also while Donald Trump is the wild card who at any moment could go in there and be like, Mike Johnson, more like pedophile Johnson, or whatever he does. Like he'll just throw out some random accusation, some random insult, some random whatever. And people think that's an exaggeration, but that is what he tried to accuse Ron DeSantis of at the start of the election. He tried to accuse him of touching his old students, which just kind of flew under the radar. So that's the position the Republican Party is in. So the fringe have more leverage due to how small the majority is. And so if he wants to get anything done, he's going to have to get their approval, which is why he hasn't gotten anything done, and the Republicans have achieved very little after they became the House majority. And so after so much of a mess of this election rate, of all these elections to become House Speaker, the Republicans want to deliver something to people to show that they, they're not a mess and they actually can govern, and they're not just, it's all chaotic and they're all going to kill each other if you actually gave them power again. But the problem is the compromises that would be necessary, since the Democrats control the Senate and the House, the Senate and the presidency, the far-right fringe is not willing to do. And so Mike Johnson is between a rock and a hard place now. If he wants probably to get some compromise done, if Dan Crenshaw and other people want to be believed, but the fringe of his party doesn't want to make any compromise that isn't literally instituting Trump-era immigration policy, which isn't going to happen because the Democrats beat Trump because they didn't like Trump-era immigration policy. So they're asking them to basically deliver on the entirety of the Republican agenda, and that's the only thing they will accept. Why? Why would they do that when they could get victories and compromises and $18 billion in new funds for the border and more restrictions on who the migrants and refugees can be? Why would they give up this victory that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise now that they've leveraged it to Ukraine aid? Because that's what they're trying to do to get it through, since they can't get it through otherwise. Well, I'm sorry, I know this is a lot, but it's complicated politics. I think if you were to ask me, that from Trump's position, and Trump's now come out against the idea of making a deal, even though they haven't even seen the deal yet, even though rumors are that many Senate Republicans are very happy with the deal, he doesn't want Biden, in my opinion, to make any progress on dealing with the border crisis, because then he gives him a political victory going into an election season. And since Trump's main pitch has always been migrants, it basically to distill down his immigration policy. I know it's more complicated than that, but it would be painful for him politically if he was to give that victory for Biden. I think that's Trump's view. And so I think he's going to try to sink it. And if he tries to sink it, that's a difficult position for Mike Johnson, because the Republican base loves that party. And there are people within the House that will do anything that Trump says. So if he tells them recall vote. And who helped get Mike Johnson in there over Tom Emmer? Donald Trump. And so it's a really difficult position where Senate Republicans are like, we'll never get a chance to get this type of compromise with Democrats again, because Democrats are willing to compromise because they care about Ukraine that much. If Republicans win and this Trump plan goes through, they're not going to get the stuff they want. The reason they're not going to get the stuff they want is they need 60 Senate votes in order to implement many of the policies they want, which they can't get without the Democrats. So if they refuse the Democrat deal now while they have the leverage, and then try it again when the Democrats are the opposition, they're just all going to vote against it and they won't get it anyway. So
this is the biggest deal Go ahead. Oh, sorry, Dylan.
Sorry, I think that's enough. I've been rambling about it for too long. I hope I gave you a general idea of why this position is extremely difficult and why we've been in gridlock since October. That's when the first deal was supposed to be agreed upon, by the way, and last year in October.
Yeah, my question is why did it got connected to the aid for Ukraine in the first place?
See, that's a great question, because anybody from the outside looking in, and I'm thinking about how historians are going to look at this. They're going to be reading books about the war in Ukraine, and eventually it's going to be like, American aid stopped getting sent to Ukraine because, well, they were angry about their border immigrant. What? What does that have to do with it? Like, historians are going to be super confused. Well, it's a few reasons. Number one, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, they don't want aid to go to Ukraine, period. They believe that it's a waste of money. I would say some of them probably have sympathies with the invaders. I would point towards Marjorie Taylor Greene, since she has repeated Russian propaganda. I mean, some of it even just bizarre. She said that the Ukrainian government is harvesting the organs of babies in order to pay for the war effort. Just like bizarre propaganda being repeated by an American congressperson. So I do think there's some of that, but a lot of it's basic isolationism. Why are we defending the Europeans? Why are we defending them? We need to deal with the border. We need to deal with veterans. We need to deal with whatever the issue is. Isolationism, populism. So they're against that. They're against sending aid to Ukraine, period. So the idea was, from Mike Johnson's perspective, is maybe we can get the Ukraine aid through, since it is an American security priority, by tying it to immigration. So therefore we get an immigration victory. Mike Johnson has a victory under his belt. The Republicans have a victory under their belt. And it makes it easier for those Republicans who regularly wouldn't vote for Ukraine aid to accept a vote for Ukraine aid. Now, the majority of the House, the majority of the Senate, majority of the American people, and the presidency already support Ukraine aid, but the House Speaker chooses what gets brought on the floor. So if he chooses not to bring it to the floor, then it's not brought to the floor. And so even if we still have all the support, that decision still ultimately has to be made by the House Speaker. And so if he has a reason politically not to do it, then he won't. So tying it to that was a way for him to try to maneuver the extremely difficult political position he's in. But what that's meant is it's basically tied a giant like brick to the legislation until we can maneuver around this, since Donald Trump now is against any compromise, period. And Senate Republicans are pissed. They're pissed because they just spent months negotiating the best deal they're probably ever going to get with a Democratic president on immigration. Things that could empower Donald Trump, if he became president again, to try to combat immigration, combat these issues they care about. Something that could stop the inflow of some migrants now, since that's a priority of theirs. And they're just going to drop it so Trump can say, look at me, the border's so bad. I know Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell are not happy. I know Lackford, who was the Republican senator who negotiated this, is pissed. But a lot of them are suggesting, and Dan Crenshaw was one of them, that they haven't even technically seen the deal yet. So maybe Trump will change his tune once he sees the deal, and someone in his inner circle will explain to him the powers that it would give him once he became president again. And there's nothing stopping the Republicans from trying to reassert the priorities that they didn't get through once they became president, if they won in 2024.
Yeah, a couple things. That it's the single largest. That's why Dylan's reiterating it. It's the single largest deal like that Democrats have brokered for the border, like, to date. 18 billion still. And the reason that they put it together, and me and Dylan debated this like months ago, because I went to Congress and talked about it. And you asked, like, why did they put it all together? It's because Biden administration wanted to, at the time, again, Hamas just attacked. The Republicans have been saying there's an invasion at the border at the same time. Obviously,
October,
Russia,
right?
Yeah, it was October. So it was like, well, it was leading up to that. It was like leading up to that. Like they were talking about issues well before this. Like there was problems in the political landscape internally. When I went and talked to them, like there was issues in September. They're like, hey, we're worried about the funding to Israel. We're worried about this. Republicans were worried about the border. So Biden administration was like, we're just going to put it all together. We'll put all of it together, make everybody happy. And that's what they said. Me and Dylan debated this, and Dylan said,
I just remembered something. I just remembered. Do you remember when Mike Johnson became House Speaker? One of the things Matt Gaetz wanted from him, because Matt Gaetz is one of those like fiscal conservatives types. He's like, we need to spend less, budget. You get the idea. One of the things he proposed was he's angry of these big budget deals where they take all these unrelated issues because of how pork barrel politics works, put it into one big bill, and you could have some things in the bill that you like, but things in the bill you don't like. And so he doesn't like that. So he wanted stuff to be voted on separately. And Mike Johnson, when he got into office, he declared that that's how it should be done. which I think, considering how it's going now, it's a little ironic.
Didn't age like a fine milk.
That's what he said in order to gain Matt Gaetz' support in order to become House Speaker.
My question on the follow-up to this is, like, it's actually 3 questions, so I'm going to just bundle them up together into one.
Oh yeah, we love that. Nice.
Yeah. One thing is, like, do they even want the deal? And if they will not take the deal, right, we know that full responsibility is on Mike Johnson for that, because it's for him to put something on the vote in the Congress. So if the Senate agrees to a deal, sends it to Congress, if I'm understanding, like, you will be able to.
Yes, that would be the idea.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how will then later they explain that they will not do any deal? Would it hurt their chances? Like, what's the... I'll finish bunching up. And then second one, what will prevent, if this will go through and they get their deal and so on, what will prevent Ukraine being taken hostage again and do the same thing with something completely related next time? And finally, can something be done to kind of circumvent that? I've read something on Twitter, also known as shitter, that you can potentially, the president can take some of the older stocks that are written off in the military and send it to Ukraine. Is there any kind of path towards it? And there you go.
So can you tell me what sorry, there were 3 questions there. I forgot the first one in the process of listening.
How will they explain?
Oh, how will they explain?
What will happen if, and let me do
this. Do you want to take this first, Mercado, or should I just do these one at a time?
You got it. Nope.
Sure.
Go ahead.
When it comes to how will they explain, the hope is amongst Senate Republicans is that once they pass the deal and people see the legislation and how much Democrats are giving them, which, by the way, it's probably going to be enough that there are going to be progressive Democrats who don't want the deal to go through. And if it's getting to that point, then that also just shows, like, how much of an opportunity they would basically give up for Trump's political expediency, which is how I equate this, by the way. It's for Trump's political expediency.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult for him to explain it. And so I've seen him try to explain it. And the way he's tried to explain it is just like, well, we need more. We need more border. And that's literally what he said. When people ask me about this, border. And so it seems that his pitch, if he ends up going with Trump and Trump tells him to ditch it, and Trump says jump this high, says jump, he says how high. If that's how it goes, I think his response is basically just going to be, well, we needed more. Which is going to be responded to by Senate Republicans. You're not going to get more. Lindsey Graham has already said, if we try this again while Democrats are in power, we are not going to get a better deal. The Ukraine stuff is being used as leverage. They genuinely care about the Ukraine issue. That is why they're doing this. In other circumstances, they would not agree to these terms. So I think the explanation is going to be a piss poor explanation, but it's just basically going to be, it wasn't enough, right?
Yeah, so basically no good faith discussion.
I don't think that, no. In fact, when they were trying to negotiate this deal for Ukraine, Biden was supposed to have a meeting with Mike Johnson, and hours before that meeting, as they were finalizing the Senate deal, and they had like one last issue that was kind of contentious, so they wanted to sit down and talk about it, Mike Johnson called him and said, like a few hours before the meeting, I'm not going to show. Click. He's just not going to go because he doesn't. I think a part of it might legitimately just be he doesn't know if he has the okay from the big man upstairs, and the far right of his fringe, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying her statement is if there's any aid sent to Ukraine, she will call a recall vote. If that is her position and she's genuine about that, and the party doesn't work to pressure her to make sure that isn't the case, then there could be other motivations keeping him back. But Trump, I think, is the real wild card element here. I think a lot of people are waiting to take the directions from Trump. And the more he suggests he's against it, the more I'm seeing their elected Republicans start talking about, well, it isn't enough and da-da-da. So I'm very worried about the Trump element. But I think that the more senior Republicans in the Senate are going to be the ones pushing the hardest for this deal, and they should be the ones pushing the hardest for this deal, because they know from their experience in politics, they're not going to get another deal like this. What was the last question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, what was that third one?
Yeah, the second one was like, will they use it again?
Oh, this question, this is a big fear of mine. My fear is that we'll pass a package for 2024, and then we'll come around again, and we'll need to pass more. There'll be some new need that needs to be met. And next time it'll be, well, you need another 20 billion for the border. You need 25 billion. And the demands will increase until it reaches a point where the Democrats just cannot, like, no, we're not going to reintroduce HR 2, which is like the Republican standard, the Trump standard for immigration policy. We ran against you because we disagree with HR 2. So why would we reintroduce HR 2? And then Ukraine aid can fall through. That is a real fear for me. And it's also the fear of European governments if they were to accept the Viktor Orban deal, which is maybe we let the Ukraine aid go through now, but every year we need to revisit it and revote on continuing the aid, which defeats the purpose of the $50 billion aid package, which is supposed to inspire confidence that Europe's going to be with them until 2027 and onward into the future. It doesn't inspire that confidence. It's like, I don't know, maybe we'll change our mind in a year. Who knows? So it undermines the purpose of the aid. It undermines our negotiating position with the Russians, because it looks like we're just waiting for an opportunity to cut loose, and we're leaving opportunities to cut loose very easily, and we're trying to keep those avenues open, when I think the position should be, we're with Ukraine, we're staying with Ukraine, keep falling on the sword if you want, but the sooner you leave, the better, which I think should be the general position of the American government, which I feel like is undermined. Our negotiating position and the Ukrainian position is undermined by this aid being held up, or by it possibly becoming a legislative crisis every year.
Our government.
And then final part was... Oh, sorry. No.
I was just going to add to that quick that our government spending and getting rounds of spending through is a struggle already done. Like every time now. Like, will it get through? And it has to come through at the final hour.
It is it's the thing is about that. I've talked about this before. Even though I understand the perspective of, you like fight to the bell, you want to get everything you want. When you fight to the bell like that, and the whole world is kind of waiting to see if the American government is going to shut down, they're going to shut down the national parks, and send all their federal employees on furlough, that doesn't inspire confidence. Doesn't inspire confidence in foreign investors. Doesn't inspire confidence in our allies. Doesn't inspire confidence in the economic system that we've helped build. It's not good. I don't think it inspires confidence, and I think it makes us. I think it also scares investors, so I think it's bad for economic health as well. We should not be running out the clock every time and playing footsie with government shutdowns. That has really negative impact. A real negative impact.
Edgy.
And then the last one was, can anything be done before the 10 months? Because like after 10 months, at least we know how bad the situation will be for Ukraine. Because I think if Trump is elected, then pretty much like a consensus around Europe is like, well, then we can just give up on US for the next 4 years, at least unless it turns into a complete dictatorship itself. But that's going to be a whole another conversation. But 10 months.
What do we do in 10 months, or what do we do in the meantime, you mean?
Yeah, 10 months. Can anything be done, or Ukraine just needs to kind of like wait and hope?
There's a few things that have already been done that I think inspire more confidence. For example, Congress introduced legislation making it so the president cannot unilaterally withdraw from NATO. I think that was overdue. I think the Congress should be applying its authority in that way. It also means Trump cannot now just go into conversations and be like...
If he has already, one might say, Congress in his pocket, like he's citizen Trump that's being tried for everything. It's
not that simple, though, when you think about the House and the Senate. The House is divided. Let's say best case scenario, the House is 48%, best case scenario for the Republicans, 48% Dem, 52% Republican, right? They keep the majority, even though there's good reason to believe they might lose it going into 2024. Even if that's the case, the Republican Party has like 450 people. I forget exactly how many people in the House. You can get enough pro-Ukraine Republicans together in order to try to pass through packages or push through stuff that's either favorable to Ukraine, but even more so, that I think is more in the air, NATO, which there might be Republicans that are divided on supporting Ukraine. There are not many Republicans that are straight out like, we need to withdraw from NATO. The only one that I know that is publicly taking that position is Vivek Ramaswamy, and he just dropped out of the race, right? So I think when it comes to standing with Europe, that check is in place now, and I'm happy that that check is in place now. There's other things we could do. I would say trying to start longer term projects as soon as possible and doing it through the legislative branch would be good. But the problem is, again, you'd have to get through Mike Johnson. A lot of this is, I think, in large part going to be somewhat determined by the results of the 2024 election. Zelensky recently said in an interview with Channel 4 News that his fear is that Trump gets in and he says he wants to make a deal on day one. And so the plan is going to be, if the Ukrainians are like, no, we're not going to give up we're not going to give up Mariupol, we're not going to give up this, we're not going to give up that, that he'll just make a deal without them anyway, and then all American support will cease. That's the thing that Zelensky said slightly scares him. But if he says it slightly scares him, that means it probably really does scare him. So I do think it's a genuine concern, but also that NATO law does show that Congress at the very least has authority, as it always has, on the executive branch to exert power over a foreign policy. So I would say that doing our best to use that majority that is supported, that supports the Ukrainians, that supports continued NATO membership, would be the best strategy. One way that could be helpful would be if we got the House, but Trump won the presidency. That's one way we could still bring legislation to the floor and try to pass it through the Senate and see if we can get it through with a veto-proof majority, which would be hard, but we could attempt to do it. And considering that the Republican senators like Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham support Ukraine, it's not impossible. Look, the political fight would get 10 times harder and the odds of failure would greatly increase if Trump was president, but I wouldn't necessarily say 100% it would fail. One wild card element that I've been thinking about a lot is, what if Trump just decides to switch his opinion? Trump does this all the time on issues. Syria was a great example. We're going to pull out, never mind. We're going to pull out, never mind. We're going to pull out, never mind. Whoever was the last person to whisper in his ear, a lot of times was the policy that he ended up taking, because he doesn't have deep foreign policy beliefs. And so he has said that if the Russians don't take the deal he offers and he thinks is good, then maybe he'll just double support to Ukraine. If he gets stiffed in some way and the media's like, Putin loving Trump is a coward, and he's getting, oh my God, look at him getting dragged through the mud. Man, he's kind of gay and stupid and a loser, and I bet he has small hands, or whatever pisses off Trump the most, right? And he sees that on the media, or he sees that type of critique. I could see him responding kind of in a reactionary way, like, I'll show you. I could see that with Donald Trump. I don't think it's likely, but we've seen him do it before, and I think he could do it again. And he's at least hinted at it.
Another thing Biden can use specifically over the next 10 months, if this thing doesn't get through, is the excess defense articles, right? That's like old weaponry that we no longer use. He's been using the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which is weapons that we might still use, but they're newer weapons, right? They're moderner weapons. But all of our old shit, that are truly in our stocks that we don't use at all, Biden can pull from that. He has. I don't think he might have used it once, maybe, but I don't think he has. I don't have the research on that, but he can use the excess defense authority if this thing doesn't work to still get weapons to Ukraine, and Ukrainians will use them. And even if it's older stuff, we've seen what they can do with little that they get, even with one hand behind their back. So an old Humvee, Ukrainians can use that, for example.
It needs to be delivered home though that our aid to Ukraine will not be serious until we get congressionally approved aid. We will not get it in the amounts that are necessary for Ukraine to not only hold the line, but certainly take more territory back going into 2025 after a period of active defense, which most analysts and Ukrainians seem to be taking the perspective of what 24 is going to look like, a sort of active defense. It's going to require congressionally approved aid. There's no way for us to finagle around congressional approval for us to support Ukraine in a way that could actually get them something that resembles victory.
Then a question about the strong support. Like, Dylan, you're the Democrat, right?
Yes, I'm a Democrat.
I want to challenge you then on that. Why has Biden been so weak and shit on supporting Ukraine? Why Ukraine ended up with 100 Bradleys instead of 1,000 Bradleys, and we would not see just one video of Bradleys taking apart T-90Ms, but many of those. Why U.S. never kind of pledged or even spearheaded the plane coalition to try to deliver F-16s? It's not that Ukraine couldn't use F-16s. Why it's the countries like Belgium, Denmark, Netherlands needs to scrap around, try to find like whatever planes they have left, instead of Biden saying, okay, let's do it, you guys join in, but we're big, we're spearheading. Why there is so much holdback? I can understand this from the Europeans, like, because our defense industry is garbage. It's dog shit. It has been dog shit for a while now. Like, it's been acknowledged, thankfully, in the last 3 years, and we're on the path to redemption slowly. But it does not make sense for me why it was not so from the get-go. Why are we here now?
I think that the concern from their perspective, and I think that they were overeager in this concern. I think they could have sent some more support sooner. Definitely when preparing for the counteroffensive. But I think the main concern was, from a foreign policy perspective, was the idea of escalation. We hear about this all the time. And this is still the country of George Kennan. This is still the country of the mysterious Russian, soul, and an interest in that tradition that we had with the Soviet Union and the Russians of diplomacy during the Cold War. And that tradition still exists in American foreign policy. They were scared that if we were to send too much aid to the Ukrainians too quickly, that it could cause some incident where the Russians feel like maybe they'd use some tactical nuclear weapon or escalate to a level which the American people were not ready to meet after feeling, I would say, some amount of war weariness after Iraq and Afghanistan. And so the American president, understanding that they're dealing with a nuclear power here, the only other country that has more nukes than we have, in order to try to control for that escalation, they were going to space these aid deliveries out over a period of time so they could slowly test the resolve of the Russians and to see how serious their chest beating was. And over time, what they found was it was chest beating. It was saber rattling. It was an attempt to try to slow down aid or divert aid by trying to scare the world with either basically suicide bombing, nuclear weapon, like we can end the world type rhetoric, or by trying to, appeal to, diplomatic compromise. But I think the problem of escalation was a primary motivator there. A secondary motivator, but this is also very real, is the American government at the start of the invasion did not think the Ukrainians had a good shot. While the story about, more ammunition not a ride, we don't know if that's true. We do know that they did offer a ride to Zelensky. They were preparing for the Ukrainian government to collapse and to deal with a new power balance in Europe. And so since that's what they thought for the first few months, you're not going to send all your top level tanks, jets, equipment to a country that you think is going to collapse in a week, and then the Russians are going to be able to parade around with the brand new equipment you just sent all that money on. And that's after Joe Biden was critiqued after Afghanistan for leaving the equipment there to be captured by the Taliban. So not only would that be just bad from a national security standpoint, especially if any of the stuff captured has information on it that the Russians could use to further weaken our defenses. And, all power in the international stage is relative. So if they can undermine our weapons ability to function, then, our amount of power is decreased. I think it was also a fear of those weapons being captured, either for the intelligence it could provide the Russians or just, the hit on America. Like our image on the world stage. By the way, I'm explaining the reasons. That doesn't mean I think these reasons outweigh the benefits of giving them. I'm just explaining probably why the American government did that. As for the F-16s, I think the average price of an F-16 is somewhere between $30 million to $60 million. I forget the exact price of an F-16, but these are very expensive aircrafts. And what I heard about why the United States wasn't sending F-16s was probably partially the escalation concern, but also since these things are so expensive and American aid is congressionally approved, and they have to we approve this much money and then you have to allocate that for what's the most important needs. The American government said that they determined that F-16s was, while something Ukraine needed, was not one of their main priorities. And since it was so expensive, they didn't want to end up giving them like 30 F-16s and then end up taking away 10 to 20 to 30% of their necessary or like their allocated aid when it could have been spent on things that were higher priority, like artillery shells, armored vehicles, stuff that they need on the front. That at least was the American government's argument. Now, you can still disagree with that argument, but that was their perspective.
So basically, when we were joking around and saying like, "Oh my God, Germany is just afraid of escalation," it was actually the U.S. that was.
Germany takes point from the United States, I think, with a lot of these things. Definitely when it comes to escalating with the Russians. The Germans have always, not always patting America back about its international influence. They have always relied on the American hegemony for their defense. I mean, that's why their defense spending has been relatively low.
Sure, but what will then explain the tempo? Like, why the tempo is that as it is? Like, maybe not in the quantities provided, but definitely the capabilities. Like, I'm not sure if you listened ever to General Ben Hodges. Yeah. He's been crying out loud for over like 2 years that Ukraine needs certain capabilities. Like it doesn't need just weapons and so on. It needs to be specific capabilities that needs to be established by Ukrainian. And for example, long-range capabilities are still not there.
Yep.
And it's not because of the lack of trying. It's like ATACMS was like a cry out loud that was made like forever.
Yep.
And it ended up like as a half-witted effort. Like I think it's like it went worse than my first date or my first attempt at sex, just because like how wimpy and weak it was. It was absolutely despicable. Like let's give the 20 of the oldest and the least range rockets, missiles that can fly. Like let's just not give Ukraine longer off range.
Yeah, we gave them the M39 blocks.
Yeah. If I can follow you through, like there is some kind of like escalation, a danger of escalation, and apparently US is afraid of Putin and so on. Fair enough. I understand nuclear power. Ooh, nukes, very scary. Understand. But how long does this, like, is there an end to this curve? Do you think that we are peaking, like that there is no more capabilities that Ukraine will gain? Or we're going to see slowdown or maybe increase? Do you think there is a learning opportunity?
It's so hard for me to analyze exactly because of just the difficult political position we're in. But I will say that if we were to provide those just the M39 block ATACMS to the Ukrainians sooner, we could have had them attack those helicopters, which is what they did, disabled a ton of them. And those helicopters, which were harassing the 47th and all of these new mechanized units that were trained over in Europe and stopping their advances, they could have been disabled or at least made to pull back so that they're not engaging those troops. It could have made the counteroffensive, maybe the idea that if we just gave them ATACMS that they would have taken Mariupol back. Obviously, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it would have increased their capabilities and it would have increased odds of success at the very least. It would have increased the tools in their tool belt. And I agree that we should send them that. If the goal is for Ukraine to win, then they're going to need the long-range strike capabilities to strain Russian logistics. The Russians have more people. The Russians have more armor. The Russians have more money. The Russians have, in total terms, basically more of everything. And so what you need to do, and to make it a more balanced playing field, is make it so that, that giant force of people they have are not going to have as many bullets, not going to have as many mortars. And so they might have a ton of people, but their total combat power, their total effective combat power is heavily reduced. This is why the Chinese had tons and tons and tons of soldiers ramming into UN positions in Korea, but then they got hammered and they didn't take the positions and they weren't able to push the UN soldiers into the sea, was because the Americans had more combat capability. They had more actual combat power through their artillery guns, through being well fed, through being well supplied, having good logistics that they learned through the Second World War. So that increased the total amount of combat power per person. And so even if we had less people, they ended up doing more damage. That's what the Ukrainians have to find the equation for. Either if they're going to fight this into a long, brutal battle, it's going to be a slugfest, an attritional fight, then that's going to be important because they're going to have to take out many more Russians for every Ukrainian they lose if it becomes an attritional struggle. But also, if you want to break through the lines, you're going to have to be able to aim a ton of potential combat power at a single point, hammer it, and then break through. If you want to do one of these combined arm operations that the counteroffensive was supposed to be built around, the Americans were suggesting that they do. So either way, this is going to be integral for Ukrainian operations going forward. Zelensky has said that isolating Crimea is central to the Ukrainian war strategy. And the only way you can isolate Crimea is going to be through things like long-range missiles that target their radars, target their air defense systems, and eventually, whether it's the Taurus missiles or something else, which the Bundestag just rejected, for partisan politics, it seemed like it was the opposition that did it, but something to disable the Kerch Bridge, which is the main Russian artery down south.
It hasn't been for lack of trying either. I mean, everyone that's American that I know that's been tracking, we've been advocating our ass off to get the weapons there. I went to Congress myself for the ATACMS and honestly, the only ones interested in hearing about it were the Democrats. I tried talking to the Republicans, and they were just like, we don't want it to be a blank check. And I'm like, oh God, dude, I have to go into a whole propaganda argument with you on that. But all the Democrats had a person from Department of Defense or like some expert there taking notes while I'm like, hey, they need this long range ATACMS. They can like hit every part of the occupied space from a safe distance in the liberated area or in like Zaporizhia, for example. Like they can, if they had long range ATACMS, they can hit all the way to the Black Sea with one of those things. So it wasn't for lack of trying, but also like Dylan like has so eloquently laid out now is our internal issues with our own internal politics, and like bringing forth bills is like you're like losing your job if you're a Republican doing this. Like Dylan mentioned earlier, Marjorie Taylor Greene said if there's a Ukraine bill put on there, she's gonna put up a vote to remove the speaker if Mike Johnson goes through with it. So it's also that as well. It's Biden. I've been grilling him every stream I do. Like Biden, dude, these trickle down weapons, I call them, these trickle down weapon systems, where he's like that.
I will say that I don't know what percentage of it also is all the factors we listed earlier, like escalation and America's domestic political situation.
Plus all of that.
This is also why I'm not a realist, is because that view of the black box of the state is very I think. It's too reductionist, because if you were to just view this from a realist black box perspective, sorry to get into IR theory right now, you would completely disregard all of the internal politics of the United States and just analyze it from what would be the most rational thing for the United States to do right now. But because of our domestic politics, we're not doing what would be the most rational thing for the state to do right now and try to stand with its ally, keep deterrence, any of their motivations. It's very bizarre.
This Russian propaganda is working these people too, like crazy.
Yeah, I have a last question for America, and then we can go maybe to your stream questions and so on. Talk about those. Well, we in Europe are extremely worried about US because in the last like couple of years and so on, US external politics, especially with relation to Ukraine, has been hectic, extremely hectic. It's now is even less, even more so. I think what Dylan brought up with the bill that prohibits the unilateral withdrawal from NATO is a big reinforcement. But everyone is still looking at Trump, and everyone is like, okay, if this is like, if the only thing that convicted rapist can be elected as a president of the United States, then where are we then? Like, what can we work with? Because Article 5 of NATO, yes, maybe US will not withdraw from NATO, but if there is a president that has no will to defend its allies, then nothing kind of obliges him to do
Trump
so.
Trump did say...
Yes, there's an Article 5, but it doesn't really matter, like, if the troops are not going anywhere.
Trump did say to a European official that he would not come to Europe's defense if it was attacked.
Yep.
Yeah.
His own words.
So my question to you, Andrew, and to Dylan as well, is: do you think it can be resolved somehow in the future? Do you think that there is a path for, like, because 4 years ago when Biden came in, a sense like America is back. Well, it's like 4 years later, and it's kind of like maybe, but it's also not sure where this is going. What can we expect from
There
US?
was a really interesting foreign affairs article that I really liked that talked about how Trump's not even in office yet, and he's already affecting American foreign policy, because foreign leaders are looking at the United States. They're looking at the polling data where Trump is either in some polls he's up, some polls he's tied, but there's no polls where Biden is crushing him. You could look at special election results to try to make a good prediction for Democrats. There's good signs for Democrats in certain areas. You could talk about the general upswing in the economy, the downward trending of gas prices, downward trending of inflation, unemployment rate being I think like the lowest rate in history for like the longest period of time. I forget a lot of decent economic data, but foreign governments are taking into their calculations that if Trump gets in there, he can cause chaos amongst American allies and then possibly get a better deal. Maybe either a better deal with America's allies, which will then have less for sure backing from the United States, or with the United States directly when it comes to an issue, for example, like Ukraine. And that's really scary to me. And I think that also shows how the world views Donald Trump. Where I see a lot of people going into the 2024 election and they see the chaos in the world. They see what's going on in Gaza and Israel. They go and see what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. And their conclusion is like, oh, they respected Trump They don't respect Biden because everything's chaotic now, but it wasn't chaotic under Trump. But then when you look at the decision-making process of these governments overseas, they're praying for a Trump victory. Why would they be praying for a Trump victory if a Trump victory would mean, oh, now we respect America, we're backing off? I think a lot of times you just got to listen to what leaders say or what people say. People like try to make the analysis very complicated and overly complicated. It's like when I'm talking about what do the Russians want? Just listen to the Russians. They'll tell you what they want. It's not that complicated. You can see how foreign governments are treating the United States with the knowledge that Trump could get in office. Sergei Shoigu said during one of these meetings where he was talking about how Russia had conquered all and Avdiivka will fall tomorrow. In one of these meetings, he said that the Russian war strategy is to last till at least 2025. What happens in 2024 this year on November 5th that would make it so he thinks that maybe in January of next year, then they can kind of wrap this whole shindig up. It's the American election. And so this is genuinely concerning. As for what to do about that, again, the American Congress, I think it's their role to step up in the situation. Because if the American people have to step up and hopefully vote in a way that I think would be probably better for the country's foreign policy future. But if that fails, then it's going to fall to the Congress to stop the president from doing things from a foreign policy perspective that are reckless, or doing things that it could either betray our allies or get us into like crazy wars that we didn't want. For example, the Soleimani strike was something that really outraged many Congress people, because not even necessarily that they killed Soleimani. Soleimani's a rat bastard, but the fact that they did it without congressional approval, that's separate from if it was a smart idea. And so Congress has at least shown that they don't like it with the executive, goes out of their way and violates rules to do things outside of the norms that have been set by Congress. But it's up for Congress to get in the way and get veto-proof majorities to stop him from doing things that are incredibly reckless. And considering how many people kind of take orders directly from Trump and the Republican Party, I don't know if those veto-proof majorities are possible, which is why I'm not like 100% confident that a Congress will come there and save the day if Trump is the chief executive.
The soul of America is on the ballot this year. That's for sure. Like it's so cringe.
Good Biden
it
quote.
Sounds so tropey. Yeah, Biden quote, right? It sounds so cringe, but it's I mean, it's reality. I mean, with Biden, right? Might not agree with all of his policies. So you have the freedom to do that, 100%. But at least we'll have another president in 4 years, or like we'll get to vote again. With Trump, he's like, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. Says it open, like Dylan said. Listen to what they say. Listen to the words that are coming out of the mouths of them, right? And he says this, but he also and beyond, like he says, and he's just one of his recent speeches. He's like, he mentioned something, and I'm not going to get the quote correct, so don't quote me on Donald Trump, but he said and beyond or something, like as if he's going to be president longer than just the 4 years. Like he said this just recently.
I saw the quote.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. Okay, Dylan, back me up. Yes. All right.
Isn't he still the president?
True.
True. So it's concerning, as Elon would put it. It's concerning, but actually concerning though for America. And I'm hoping, like Dylan said, American people will choose the non-fascist dictator totalitarian vote. I mean, you got other choices, but I mean, I'm concerned. I've been saying that though.
Well, all I'm saying is, if you're a Republican, maybe you should think twice about voting for the guy who said he wanted to suspend the U.S. Constitution because he lost an election. Just saying.
I'm just hoping that next time it's going to be in 4 years. It's going to be Rudy Giuliani, and hopefully he's going to make
President Giuliani.
Seasons. Yeah, at 4 seasons.
I'm voting for, dude. I'm writing in Hunter. I'm writing him in.
I'm putting in his.
Didn't Hunter do some kind of like a Giga Chat move when he was in that congressional meeting?
Yes, they were terrified of him.
Just completely was seething.
They were terrified of him, man. They know that he'll get up there and he'll drag them all across the floor, dude. And if you can, they have been dealing with Sleepy Joe for too long, but Hunter, he smokes crack. He ain't sleepy. He got the energy. He can deal with them.
He's hard in the morning, ready to go.
He's ready.
Hard charging.
He's ready.
Sorry, hard charging. Yeah.
But it's also funny seeing Marjorie Taylor Greene talk to him, considering Marjorie Taylor Greene was like in Congress showing naked pictures of Hunter Biden, showing like porn of Hunter Biden. Here's his wiener. Why do I have a picture of Hunter Biden's wiener? That's the question all Americans should be asking right now.
Point of order. Why is the gentle lady presenting porn in the
point of order? Is he circumcised or not? The American people must know.
That's what we have going on, G. That's U.S. No real shit. Though. That's what's going on in our government.
And most of us in Europe here is like so like what's the big deal? Like so it's a problem. Was new, and that was the funniest thing. But I understand why. But for us here, it's like funny. Like we had this guy, to put it in a perspective. What is that? It wasn't Salvini. It was someone else.
One second. I'm sorry. Mercado, I'm trying not to smoke on stream, but if Mercado's going to smoke, that bastard, okay, I'm going to go smoke. Okay, I'll be right back.
All right, go ahead. Anyway, go ahead, G.
Yeah, it wasn't Salvini. It was another Italian politician, like absolute asshole, like big friend of Putin. He died not so long ago. And he was like a big womanizer. Like there was like one sex scandal after another one with him. So kind of and he was like an acting like official. Like he was like the prime minister or a president. I forgot who is completely in charge in Italy. We have different systems, but the best part was
I think the local capo rules it. I forget what they rule by.
Yeah, it's like Italy is pretty wicked. And like he was official because Hunter, he's like a private person, right? He's not even a politician.
No, he's a lawyer. His brother was a politician, but he was a lawyer. Yeah, the reason why Hunter's gotten so much attention, if you're actually curious about the Hunter Biden story, is Joe Biden's whole like family history is full of unbelievable tragedy. Like his son like getting cancer and dying, his wife getting killed in a car accident, both of his children getting horribly scarred and injured, full body cast from car accident, just family tragedy after family tragedy. And Hunter Biden, through that, ended up getting addicted to drugs. And since he was addicted to drugs and also surrounded by very powerful people, he tried to use his experience as a lawyer and proximity to the vice president of the United States at the time in order to get some jobs that he probably shouldn't have had. Like, he was a lawyer, so working for Burisma isn't completely like he can do literally nothing, but he doesn't have any history in the oil and gas field. He doesn't have any real reason to be on that Ukrainian energy company. The real scandal around Hunter, people try to like go and theorize based upon that. I think it's, as far as I can see right now, it's all bullshit. But I do think there is a real problem of like silver spoon, this guy of not because of his own genuine like hard work, not because of his meritocratic skills. He was basically awarded tons of money because people thought maybe they could use him to get to his father. That's bad, and I think there is a conflict of interest, but we have no proof that that conflict of interest was acted upon. So I'm against it, but I'm against it in the same way that Jared Kushner took over $2 billion from the Saudi Foreign Wealth Fund. Now, the thing that's great about the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund in this deal, so I don't know how much you know about Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner is the stepson of Donald Trump. He was also the person who managed the Middle East peace deal, like the Abraham Accords.
I thought he was a husband of one of his.
That's what a stepson is.
Stepson. Is that a stepson?
A stepson is when you marry like your daughter that makes you a stepson.
Okay.
Yes. So he is the stepson of the president. He was given all these positions and he did a lot of deals with the Saudis. But once he left office and Trump, his first foreign visit was the Saudis. Trump approved tons of weapons for the Saudis, and the Saudis bought a lot of rooms at his hotels while he was in office, by the way. But once the regime went under and Jared Kushner was out of a job, he had a history in real estate. But all of a sudden, the Saudi Foreign Wealth Fund gave him $2 billion.
Isn't his son-in-law? People
son-in-law.
Yeah, son-in-law.
Stepson is.
No, stepson, son-in-law. Sorry, I said stepson. Yeah, son-in-law. L for me. L for me.
Too much. Yeah.
But the $2 billion from the Saudi Foreign Wealth Fund given to him for a field that he has no experience in. So the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia, the government gave him $2 billion for financial projects that he has no experience in. And here's the kicker. The board looked at this deal of the sovereign wealth fund and they said, this guy has no experience in the type of financing we're giving him $2 billion for. This is $2 billion. This is a terrible investment. Then the crown prince overruled them and gave him the money anyway. So my position is, look, I think that any type of corruption is absolutely awful. But if your position is, yes, make Trump president, but go after that guy because, he had a silver spoon in his mouth when you're talking about Donald Trump, I think it's hypocritical. It's bad, but it should be applied equally. The standards need to be applied equally.
But what about all of the Ukrainian corruption that he left on his laptop?
That is true. All those.
That is true.
That is true.
It was found during the invasion of the U.S. southern border.
You know what pisses me off? There's real corruption in Ukraine, right? I run into the stories of people reselling humanitarian aid, of the hostile military administration pushing away like investors and people who are trying to help rebuild because of their corruption, corruption in some of the rebuilding processes, or the last defense minister and the scandal with the uniforms. There's real corruption stories, but those aren't like movie corruption stories. Right. This isn't like that, like super, like we sent over a tank and then it was sent over to Al Qaeda. I remember Vivek Ramaswamy on the campaign trail. He said that we sent over our javelins and then the javelins were sent to the cartels. And he posted an image to prove it. And it was an image of a cartel guy holding a totally separate weapon system, right? People are making up these these fairy tales, even though there's real corruption that can be talked about. But the conversation about corruption isn't about American military aid being sent over. We found no evidence that American aid has been misused. I think there was one report by the Inspector General that they've been unable to track $1 billion of the aid, but a lot of that was due to, at the start of the war, we didn't have an embassy because all of our staff had to evacuate, so they couldn't track where the aid was going. I forgot the point of the story. What were we talking about?
Nice. you were killing it though.
I was killing it for a second.
There is no point. I mean, you're just.
No.
Oh yeah, corruption. It's just these real corruption stories that they could talk about it, but it wouldn't be as fun if Tucker Carlson was like, so one government official in Ukraine gave a government contract to another government official's shell company who doesn't have experience in the field, and then they made $500,000 doing a piss poor job, and they painted over the windows and rebuild. Like, that's not as exciting as tank gets given to Al Qaeda and Houthis after being smuggled through international drug ring. It's not as fun.
Yeah, or eggs.
The WEF, the globalists. Yeah, it's Tom. You had Tom Clancy syndrome. You had a name for it.
Yes, Tom Clancy syndrome. They have to live in an adventure novel.
Yeah, or Ukrainian army buying eggs that cost 30% more. Awful story. That literally cost millions.
We have to abandon them now, obviously.
Yeah.
You know what, the Ukrainians should buy up all of Russia's eggs to the black market. We should create the egg starvation fund and see if we can. Did you see that one Russian economist on state TV reacted to it by saying just eat meat? Great.
Yes, it's like we should get some other products into. Yes, just eat something else. What's the problem? I open fridge. There is other food in there. Why do we need it?
It's a new product. I can't believe it's not eggs.
No, it's like the story with the eggs. It's actually like now that they disappeared, but I loved when it was developing, because the story was kind of going on, and it first appeared like in regions in Russia. And first it was like that the eggs become more expensive, so they started reducing the packs. So at some point they started selling eggs like by piece, and then they.
I saw like a sign like, each person gets one egg.
One egg per person.
Sorry, I really shouldn't be laughing at the economic suffering of their people, but dude, it was supposed to be 3 days. The war was supposed to be 3 days, and now they're fucking facing an egg crisis.
But I thought it was a meme, right? I thought my chat was memeing me, and then I literally just typed in. I did this on stream. I typed in Russia eggs on YouTube, and there's vlogs of like the store shelves and how desolate it is. And they're like, there's like a mouse on the. She's like, look at this store. She's like a Russian, and she's like in her village, and there's like just nothing on. There's like the basic state eggs or something that are just dog shit. And then I don't. It was a horrible scene. It looked like a Russian fighting position in that store.
I don't like the idea of basing a war strategy upon like breaking the will of the Russian people. Like eventually they'll be pushed too far. It's not a good thing to bet upon because you have no clue what would be too far for the Russian people, because the Russian people have really shown that they're willing to put up with a lot of crazy shit from their government and put their civilian population through, I mean, 10 years in Afghanistan with no hope of victory. One of the most brutal bombing campaigns in the world. And it took the basically the collapse of the Soviet Union to make them turn around, right? Now, obviously, the casualty rates here are much higher, but also Ukraine's important to Russian strategic planners is much higher. I'm not saying that it's impossible, because we can see from the Russian Revolution that it is possible to push the Russian people too far, but it's not smart to plan on, because you can't plan for that stuff.
Yeah, and this is actually goes well in what I was asking before about why the hesitation and so on. Because my take, and from what I could understand, but that's why I wanted to hear your perspective, is that it was also part of the US strategy to basically create the atmosphere of Afghanistan or Vietnam, like basically a war that will never end for Russia, so that the Russian government realizes the futility of their ways and then backs off. But that's not how Russia operates. It's not how non-democratic powers operate. Like, there isn't a lot of pressure from the population towards Putin, at least yet. There was one guy, but then he decided to shoot himself.
It seems. I remember. Wait, the guy who decided to shoot himself. What do you mean?
Yeah. Prigozhin, essentially.
Oh, yeah. I thought.
Yeah. So
yeah,
like,
they were playing.
no.
They didn't shoot that. They were juggling. They were juggling grenades on the plane. They were juggling grenades on the plane.
They just got on the plane and just like.
Yeah, man.
And the A50 was like, I want to do a Prigozhin impression.
By the way, why they didn't use this excuse? Why they needed to tell that they shut down their own plane? Why they couldn't just say that they had malfunction, or like there were a couple of grenades on the plane and a Prigozhin liker or something, like anything else? Why?
A surprise statue or something, like a statue.
Yeah, so anything.
I feel like I'm trying to think from the position of the Russian propagandists, right? I watch a lot of Russian state TV. I think, honestly, you know how they have, if you go to like a high school and they see like cut marks on your arm, they'll pull you aside and be like, are you okay? Are you doing fine? Are you cutting yourself? We should treat people who watch Russian state TV, even for educational purposes, in the same way as people who cut themselves. It is a form of self-harm, but I do it anyway. And God damn it, I forgot the point of the story again. What was the
You're doing great. I'm proud of you. Yeah. So
we were talking about eggs, then we were talking about the purpose of Russian.
Oh yes, if you're the Russian propagandist and you're looking at this plane getting shot down, right? Okay. If you say it was shot down by the Ukrainians, well, that's bad, because they're supposed to be, basically Russian rural mountain folk, maybe ignorant and all controlled by that. They're not supposed to be able to stand up to us like that. It's the same reason why they had to say during the Kharkiv counteroffensive there were NATO super soldiers everywhere, because they didn't want to admit that they got bested by those that they colonize. Because once you realize once colonized people realize what they can do, that's a very dangerous thing for an empire. And it's dangerous for the people who realize, who are colonizing them, who realize what they can do. So I think on one angle, they don't want to admit the Ukrainians did it. But on the other angle, if they just say it's a malfunction, then that could make pilots scared. If the A-50, one of the most expensive aircraft in the Russian fleet, doesn't even have a full tank of gas, or it isn't even being kept up to date, then how the fuck is your old MiG-29 in comparison going to be expected to be of an even higher quality and not going to crash randomly? So I think that they might have said it was an air defense, like taking it down in order to make pilots, they thought that all of these are bad, but this one would probably inspire pilots with the most confidence to continue doing missions.
Some high-level copium, basically some
It's the least bad of a bunch of bad options.
For sure.
Oh, the dart at the dartboard. We'll hit him with this one. Hey, we destroyed 80 Bradleys today. Russian Ministry of Defense.
God, I'm so unbelievably impressed by the Bradley. You know, we're phasing those out. Phasing those out. We think that's not good enough for us anymore. This is where
it just smoked a T90 without even thinking about it. Just
now, I thought the video, I thought it was Arma when I watched it the first time. Not because I thought it looked like Arma, because I was like, somebody's fucking with me. Because that's a 25mm cannon. But then once you add the stabilization, then once you add a trained crew who knows what they're doing, and you know how quick the Russians burn through their armor crews. Oh my God, experienced Russian tank crew. It's not a word you hear that often.
Did you see the interview with the Bradley crew?
I have it pulled up in another tab. I still haven't watched it.
He literally says, I knew how to fire against it from playing World of Tanks or from playing video games.
Dog,
He knew the weak spots on the T90 and he knew where to fire at it to keep them blind because of video games. He literally says it in the interview.
Dude, I know so many people who actually use video games to train, mostly for FPVs.
America does. The U.S. military, we play Arma. We have Humvees and we do convoys in Arma and do that and train that way.
Dog, wait, are you telling me that
the armor, not actual Arma, but like the physics engine that creates the thing? Like we play in that.
Gotcha. I like the idea of like the U.S. Could you imagine just playing Army and out of nowhere there's like a really serious unit all march together doing like drills? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the same company doing the same engine.
That makes sense.
Yeah. That's what I meant. Thanks, sir.
But
all simulators though, when we're training too, like when we're going through all of it, we train on simulators, and now they have VR simulators. We didn't have VR in 2012 like they do now, but now they have VR glasses with the shit too.
Dude, the thing is, people sometimes, I'm always surprised by how well our equipment's doing in their hands. I guess I'm just very kind of happy to see, like, I know I'm not happy about war, but it's nice to know that it's when I'm out there and I see an American MRE or I see an M77 howitzer. I remember my last documentary, which I'm trying to release by the end of the month on artillery crews. I embedded with a crew in Zaporozhye that was using an M77 howitzer. There's something cool about being like, that's American steel holding the line here. There's something really, really cool about that. But I always need to stop myself from being surprised at how well this equipment performs against the Russians, because I got to remember, all of these were designed with the idea of one day being able to fight the Russians. And I think part of it in my mind was like, well, it's different because that was like 40, 50 years ago. That was Soviet Union. This is modern Russia. It's different. But they're using all the same equipment and using most of the same tactics. So yeah, it ends up doing quite well. But that tank should not have been able to have been disabled by that Bradley. That's like Jesus Christ went down and blessed that Bradley and sent him in the battle, man.
I made jokes on my stream. I said, because I know Ukraine captured a T90 and gave it to the US to like look at. I know they have that thing in the UFO hangar just looking at it like, what the fuck is this thing? All it is a T72 and a T80, like with parts put together into here's a T90, here it is. That's all it is. So it's still got the auto loader. That's why the T90 was like peppering that thing. It was like hitting.
It's aiming specifically for what he knows blows it up from fucking World of Tanks.
Playing World of Tanks because you have to hit in order to win in that game. I played it. That shit's brutal.
You have to
know the weak spots.
I got this clip from the documentary I'm doing with the artillery crews where I'm asking them what they do in their free time, and he's like, World of Tanks, and I'm like, World of Tanks. How do you? And we're 4 miles from the Russians, mind you. So he's saying on their breaks, 4 miles from the Russians, they're underground in their bunker playing World of Tanks. And I'm like, how you do that? And he points us towards a Starlink. And I'm like, who else does this? And he points to every single bed. It's like everyone except for that guy who plays Angry Birds. That guy plays Angry Birds.
It's so true. The operator Starsky plays Microsoft's Flight Simulator.
You're underground most of the day because of all the shrapnel and bombing, and you just can't be hanging out and just like doing. It's boredom, man. You got to do something in that time. And I was at them for like an hour and a half. They got to fire like one shell. What do you do in the in between?
Keep yourself occupied. Yeah, you got to keep it. It's just the mind of a soldier. I love it.
What video? Okay, here's a question. If you guys, let's say, we all went to Ukraine tomorrow, and they came up to us and said, "You're all being drafted." We're like, "We're foreigners," and then they tore up our passports, said, "No, you're not," and then they sent us with the foreign leaders or something. What video game would you play if you were out there? If you were like, I am in a war zone, it might be the last video game I play, I don't know. What video game would you be playing out there?
Can I take a board game?
Yeah, board game. You can use a board game too.
Chess. Georgie just like
Shoots and ladders. The most no. I wonder what it'd be for me.
I would be World of Tanks because it's so necessary. Clearly, that's a training simulator now.
I think I'd get Disco Elysium. It's a really good game. And I still been wanting to beat it.
Georgie, do you have time to play video games in your
not a lot
busy day?
But I do enjoy my board games. Like, so I would play Mage Knight probably. Yeah.
Mage Knight.
Yeah. But though I wouldn't really imagine there would be a lot of space for that.
I mean, we play Spades. We played Spades.
Oh my God, Hero. Yeah, okay. If computer games, yeah. Duncan, I agree with Duncan. Heroes of Might and Magic, yeah. Third one, like the old one. Absolutely, I can play like Aegis or Civilization, something like that.
Oh yeah,
I love Civ.
Georgie, we played Civ when I was deployed in the Middle East when I got sent. We all had laptops and we just bought one router, but it was we all plugged into it. LAN. We played LAN, and I played Civ 5. Oh my God, I think I had 200 hours on Civ 5. Just from that, we played that every single day. I know, dude.
You know what?
I mean, we were a little busy. We were a little busy doing work, and then in the middle. Yeah, I played the shit out of that.
Ukrainians are putting double that in a week.
Literally.
In World of Tanks.
You guys have any questions for Dylan or?
Oh yeah, chat. Q&A. I don't want to keep this guy. Oh, it's too late for. It's already super late for him. I don't want to keep you all.
He already got permission for late night with the boys. He got permission.
That's
like
good.
Now, isn't it? It's like the next day for you already, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. But I didn't like majority. I kind of hopeful. Like it's very nice that you wrote me because I had some time off on Saturday until the second part of the day, so it was a very good.
Can I ask you a question about Denmark?
Yeah.
So when you guys wake up every morning, is that because you get like a little village boy to put on wooden shoes and run through the village and wake everyone up? Or how does that work?
Phone.
Okay, gotcha.
Every morning's just a happy morning. It's
every morning
it's like a musical.
Every morning sucks. Fuck mornings. Seriously, like the whole Denmark, like we are big coffee drinkers, like and you can basically see like everyone is just drifting. Kind of the first when 7 o'clock, everyone woke up and everyone is kind of trying to get to their workplace, and everyone's just eyes are like just blank and they're like drifting, and only like your colleagues. When you wake up, you get to work, you get some sandwich with, and then you start slowly waking up. We have these morning sandwiches. It's like a
morning sandwich.
It's like a ball, of dough that you cut it in half. You put some butter on it. You put maybe some cheese or ham or maybe some jam on top, and morning coffee. Perfect. That's the start of the morning.
Yeah. We start our days with black coffee, Folgers,
and then the guy with the shoe comes.
Chad, I'm not gonna ask them what their favorite One Piece character is. Stop making Hassan memes. Okay, stop it. Do you guys think Medvedev is actually a drunkard, or do you think it's some Russia watchers believe, and I might be prescribed to this, that he might be doing it so he looks like less of a threat to Putin? What do you think about that?
He's Georgie kind of loosely explained to me about Russian opposition and how funny it is.
Medvedev is not Russian opposition.
He's
been with Putin since he was on the campaign trail. I remember I was watching old campaign documentaries. He was there. I was surprised he was still there. Fucking 1999. He was helping him run his campaign.
Don't they all capitulate eventually?
No, but he had never had his position. He has been chosen because he is. He's the weak-minded person. He's a person that would be such a loser in life, but he was carried by Putin basically. That he is still so thankful Putin for that. But because no one is taking him seriously, he's now trying to be this ultra-nationalist, radical guy, trying to always sound tough. But the point is, he's a big ass joke. like he is like everyone is like calling him like a small Dima or small Dimon, something like this. Like a tiny like like Micro Johnson we call like the same way kind of like this guy
Micro
It's like,
penis.
yeah, he's doing something, but like he's not really.
He's
like,
not doing
no one really
anything.
cares. So
It's like
and, like,
noise.
the alcoholic brand is just kind of.
Do you think he's actually an alcoholic, or do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I can't figure it out if he's actually a drunkard or not. He speaks like a drunkard. He types like a drunkard.
He gets wasted and just starts tweeting it. From what the people that actually know him.
I wish I had the confidence to do that, man. When I start
tweeting in the middle of a knife with some coffee.
Yeah.
I wish I had the confidence.
Yeah, sometimes I don't even know what to say on that app anymore. I feel like you can say whatever you want now, though, on that thing. You can like support terrorism on app.
Basically, yeah.
As long as you ask what their favorite One Piece character is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
No.
Comments here to you guys. Dylan, when you go back, send them our love. Tell that they aren't without support here in North America.
Okay, I'll be sure to. They're always very respectful, always been very helpful to me. And they appreciate any help they can get. I'll be sure to send them as much love as I can.
Have you guys played World of Tanks?
I haven't.
Yeah.
I just look. I know so many people that play it. It has a high entrance gap. What's it called? High barrier of entry. Yeah, it's once you get in there, you get clobbered all around. And I just got involved in a different World War II shooters. I just it's too much. It's too much for me. I do think it would be fun to do some like basically Curtis LeMay role play and just like strafe with big B-52 bombers. Like that sounds fun, but it just seems like such a time sink.
I want to hop in.
Actual serious question. Wow. Instead of all of the tanks and all of the memeing shit, actual serious question. Dylan, have you had the opportunity to operate a Ukrainian drone in the field?
No, I've filmed people. I filmed people training with anti-drone guns. I've been chased by drones. I've interviewed drone operators. I've not ever filmed, and that's something that I'm planning to do when I go back. Is I want to film people as they're doing a drone operation. I want to film the drone operation itself. I have a guy I know that might be able to get me that, and I'd very much like to do that because I have so much kind of like sporadic pieces of drone footage, but I need something to tie it together. And if I got that, then I feel like I could release a piece on it. I will say it's probably much more fun to be controlling the drone than getting chased by the drone, in my experience.
I got one for both of you. The ability of Ukraine to produce their own weapons and weapon systems is coming when?
2 years.
Go, Georgie. Okay.
2 years.
This is 2 years. Why? You have further on that?
Well, I mean, it's not like 2 years pass and then like suddenly it's there. No, it's going to be slowly ramping up until like in 2 years they will have a very, very decent production capabilities.
It takes time to do. It takes time for the investment, but people also need to realize that the Russians are dedicating everything they can into ammunition production expansion, everything they can, and the production facilities are expanding. We have satellite photos showing that they're building expansions into these buildings, so they are expanding production. And if we don't make those investments now, it takes time. It's not like, okay, here's $5 billion, give me these shells. It's okay, here's $5 billion. Now you need to wait for them to expand production, hire the staff, get the staff in there, start the production up, and then slowly it starts to increase production. So these are the investments that need to be made now. And we're seeing nation states like Norway invest more into artillery production. We're seeing other states invest more into artillery production, but it's still way below where it needs to be. The United States says it wants to get to, I think, 1.2 to 1.5 million shells by the end of 2024 annually, which would be a lot. And when you compare that to the Russian shells, the Russians, the idea is they're producing or getting close to producing like 2 million shells annually. So that seems like a really big help. But you got to remember, the United States is not also just concentrated on Ukraine. The United States is also sending shells over to Israel. The United States also has a massive backlog in Taiwan, not only when it comes to jets, but when it comes to shells, when it comes to javelins, when it comes to all sorts of military products. So the United States needs to make the investments knowing that it has those other needs, as well as need to expand artillery production into Ukraine, while the Russians are basically focusing only on Ukraine, right? They have their sole attention on Ukraine. It's the same problem when it comes to military planning in the Pacific. We need to have multiple fleets in the United States. We need an Atlantic fleet. We need a Pacific fleet. We have fleets everywhere, but the Chinese just need to concentrate on one area, and that's all they need to concentrate on because that's their one area of interest for what their fleet's going to do. So we have divided attention, which is why the Europeans also need to massively increase production.
Very great answers. What do you guys have any questions for Georgie or Dylan? I don't know if
somebody asked me a question, but I can just answer. Somebody said, "What's better? Do the Ukrainian soldiers prefer NATO weapons or Soviet weapons?" NATO weapons. Everybody I've spoken to, they treat the NATO equipment, treat the foreign equipment like it's gold. I hear people tell me sometimes, like, "Well, I'm worried. Well, they're just wasting away our money." I have never seen people treat weapons with more respect than I've seen with American weapons in comparison to the old Soviet junk that a lot of them have to make do with. That M777 crew understood the opportunity they had to have that artillery gun in comparison to the crew I interviewed a few days later, which were operating a gun 50, 60 years old, 4 miles from Russian positions. In some of the hottest places of some of the hottest fighting of the war. So when you talk to soldiers, the ones that get it appreciate it, and the ones who don't get it wish they got it.
Dylan, a question. What do the soldiers on the front really need in their care packages if someone were to send?
What do they need what do they need care package? I mean, like, there's always a need for tourniquets, good quality tourniquets. And anytime there isn't a need for tourniquets, eventually that need for tourniquets will reappear. So that's something that's needed. This is something they need, but it's not like humanitarian. They need drones. They need drones like crazy. They need money for drones. They need investment in drones. They need anything drone related. But it's also going to come with things like iPads and stuff like that. So I know a lot of units that are looking for drones. That's not a humanitarian care package, but there are a lot of units that I'm sure would be happy to take your money for drones, or would be happy if you have the right drones that are necessary to take your drone if you had it. What else do they need? When you say care package, you mean what everyday people can give, right? I assume that's what you mean.
Or like military equipment, or like regular military.
I would say another big thing is really warm coats right now, winter gear. And I mean, stuff that can deal with sub-zero temperatures. That stuff is expensive, but they need it really bad right now. A lot of people are dealing with frostbite, and I don't want anybody to lose their fingers.
Silk weights, polypros, like those types, and you can actually put those in an envelope because you can fold them up really nice. But those are really, really good. Eddie has a question. He sent a super chat for this one. Does the panel think that the European members of NATO will want to exert some influence during the U.S. election year by supplying longer range systems this spring to craft a new victory narrative?
A victory narrative. I think the Germans in particular, which I mean might be surprising, seem to be making a lot of noise. They seem to be the ones calling for an audit on EU funds more, which I'm also in support of. And we're finding out, I've heard from the grapevine, and it's also been reported, that there's certain nations in the coalition that isn't happy that this is going to be audited because certain nations don't want to see how little they've given in comparison to other states when it comes to their means that they have at their disposal. The Spanish are somebody I think of. The Italians are some people I think of. The French, even with the recent announcement of some long-range bombs, but it's like 100 here, or like 40 here. It's not like a very large amount. The French are also on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to aid. So I think there are nation states that are not going to be happy about the audit, but that type of pressure is necessary, especially since right now we are pinching pennies because we don't know when exactly the next aid packages are going to be approved, and we need to give them everything they can. So these unilateral aid deals being agreed upon by the United Kingdom, Norway, Sweden, they're very, very important. Even if you can't get all the EU to agree right now on like sending a package to Ukraine, even though it looks like it's getting more positive. We're going to get some news February 1st. Unilateral aid packages are still allowed. You can contribute both to the EU package and unilaterally. So I think getting an increase in unilateral aid from Spain, Italy, France, and Greece, if we could, but I mean, they're in a little bit of an economic pickle. I think people can understand the Greeks, but still, I think there's more that nation states in Europe can contribute, and that's why I think certain nation states are fearful of an audit.
Yeah, but I think a victory narrative and building victory narrative would be very, very dangerous, if not wrong. because we are very much uncertain about the help from US. And I often emphasize that by just excluding US help, Ukraine will not lose. Like Ukraine has its production, European powers are supplying quite a lot. It's not enough to win. Don't get me wrong. Like it's maybe enough for Ukraine to kind of slowly creep out and bleed the Russians dry. Yes, but it's definitely not enough to win. So building any kind of victory narrative, I feel, would be just wrong, if not dangerous, until like there is a proper support long term when from US that yes, we want Ukraine long term supporting. Before that, I would be very wary of that.
I do also want to throw out there, though, that the Europeans, while they will invest, the Europeans have emptied their stockpiles. Many of, not all of them, but many of them have. And so the ones that are most eager to continue to make further investments are also the ones that have already largely emptied out their stockpiles or have given the Ukrainians much of what they could have given them. And so while there might be a lot of desires, like I said earlier, you can't just like manifest these shells by just throwing money in the air as much as we would like to. Part of this, though, and this is going to be a critique of both the European governments and the United States, is a desire from these countries to want to make the shells domestically and not buy from foreign markets because they want to support their domestic production. And if you look at the specifics of how these aid packages go, most of these aid packages are either buying from your domestic companies, which then give the products to the Ukrainians, or investment into domestic production, which doesn't just help the Ukrainians, it helps your country as well. I think there needs to be more consideration of buying weapons from the open arms market, because in the short term, if the artillery production can't be increased, and we only have so much left in reserves that we can give them between now and when we get the shells increased production, I think buying from the international arms market is would be something that the government should pursue and be more willing and open to. If we're willing to send cluster munitions despite some moral objections, then we should be willing to buy arms from the arms market.
A question for Georgie. Why is Scholl still, or I guess maybe Dylan, unless you're educated on this too, why is Scholl still holding back on long-range Taurus?
We recently heard from Pistorius that it's right now not the priority of them, but Germany has been very consistent. We've seen this pattern all along, is that Scholz, whether because of his political internal reasons or because of his own internal weakness, he just doesn't do stuff first. He's really afraid of being the first mover. And he is definitely looking at US as a big brother. So when he sees that Biden is not supplying long-range weapons, like ATACMS as well, we talked about this, and Germans, they noted that US sent the shortest range ATACMS possible. So I feel that this pattern has been kind of going on nonstop. They've never been first movers. Remember tanks?
It was the British.
Until Biden's, yeah, it was the British said, but until Biden said that we're going to send in Abrams, which like 30 Abrams, okay, there was no approval for Leopards.
God, they look good in that camo, though. Oh my God, they look good in that woodland camo. Man, it's beautiful. Woo!
Yeah.
Very, very true.
So it's the same pattern that we've seen before. It's a humiliation fetish. So they need to be shamed for them not doing shit, so they finally start doing it.
Let me look at some questions.
Yeah, UK stepped up, chat. What were your thoughts on the recent UK package? Or Sunak visiting Ukraine? The security
I think it's good. It could be more. It's good, but again, it could be more. But it's important to have those messages set at this specific moment when everybody else is being tied up. And I assume, right, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I assume there's probably some discussions going on of like, hey, America's tied up right now in Congress. We're tied up right now with Hungarians. You're outside of the EU. You're not the United States. You could act independently here. The conservatives have the majority, has unilateral basically support in all of the parliament. you can get something through to send some sort of supportive message. So I think having that happen at this moment is good, and having it be a deal that states that into the future the United Kingdom will stand with them if Ukraine was to say get invaded again in the future. I think that's also important to show, even though nothing else has been formalized, that Europe still has the intention of making those longer term commitments. But again, it's just a commitment to security assistance in the future, not we will declare war if you're invaded again. So it still doesn't have NATO protections, but it's still positive. It's on the right track, but we're like taking like the third or fourth step on like a 20, 30, 40 step, ladder.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think Dylan is absolutely spot on. It's a step in the right direction, a very important step. And I think the moment for this step is also very good. Now that we have all of this uncertainty, it's very nice that there is still like a consistency, especially because we know the kind of support from UK was started off by the Sunak's predecessor, and he's going to continue it. So I'm going to be interested in seeing whether when Labour comes in power, what Keir Starmer is going to do.
Starmer, from everything I've heard, now I don't follow British politics tremendously closely, but from everything I heard, Starmer is very supportive of the Ukrainians, and there isn't any expectation and change in Ukraine policy between the Conservatives and Labour. If it was Jeremy Corbyn, maybe it'd be slightly different, but it's Starmer.
Yeah. But
yes. I got a question for you, since you're European. Is there any more fear of the Russian gas crisis, the idea that Europe, might run out of gas or prices are out of control? How is Europe now dealing almost 2 years on from the original gas crisis as the taps were turned off?
No one gives a shit.
Well,
literally, like never happened. Absolutely, like no one even remembers that it was a thing. It's kind of crazy. Like it blew over, like people are like, oh my God, inflation. Yeah, okay. We talk about the prices rising. Sure. Cost of living. Yes. Any kind of tie-ins with the gas and Russians, like not really. It's like, it's like just.
So do Europeans not tie any of their economic trouble to the war, really?
Majorly, no. Not in any discussion that I've heard. I mean, like, everyone understands that it's a difficult situation, but like Europe has been like a crisis after crisis after crisis for the last like 2 decades. So it's kind of like we already like, yeah, things just kind of get worse and worse and worse and worse, but we just continue on. And I mean, like European getting worse, well, I mean, it's just our beds are like temperature of the room is getting from 24 degrees to 23.8. That's things getting worse.
I think there are certain European nations.
Celsius, I don't know in Fahrenheit. Sorry.
I will give one caveat that there are certain European states where that's still not the equation. For the Hungarians, obviously, it's going to be different. If for example, if their tap was turned off tomorrow, that would be a real energy crisis because they built a dependency. But Viktor Orban's fine with that dependency. I could make a bunch of statements as to why I think so, ideological reasons, other stuff. But for them would be different. The Moldovans also are still very scared because the Moldovan economy is still heavily reliant on Russian oil and gas, and also still has Russian troops illegally stationed within it. So they would probably be another nation state that it's different, and you can see the Russian energy crisis affect Moldovan politics more. But that I'm saying that because these are addendums, these are different examples that I think should just be included.
Yeah, it's just like I don't know. Outside the EU is just a little bit harder for me to assess. I don't travel and communicate that much with people outside of EU.
Yeah, I got you.
In a sense of, like,
I want to go to Moldova.
Like,
I really want to.
It's a nice place. I have some friends there.
Mm-hmm.
A question, super chat from S. Moore. Are the Siberians resisting conscription? No. But if you want to believe, I'll allow you.
When we say resisting conscription, right? There's people resisting conscription in the way that they're staying home and they're not walking in public and hoping no draft officer finds them. There's people in this war in Ukraine that resist conscription like that. I know many of them. By the way, this is the thing that's crazy about Ukraine. Most of the draft dodgers I know also don't want to surrender. They're just fucking scared. Right? So it's not one of those situations where everybody dodging a draft is like, oh, the Zelensky regime will. It's not. They're not all like secret Gonzalo Liras. Okay, they're just like many people terrified. There are some people, but very few. Most of the draft dodgers I know are still supportive. They're just scared. But I mean, there's people resisting the draft in that way in Russia, where people are like in their remote cabin in the wilderness because they don't want to get drafted and sent over there. There are people who have left Russia for other countries to try to dodge the draft. But when we say resist conscription, there have been a few instances where conscription officers get shot, but outside of a few, what I would say exceptions to the rule, they aren't engaged in widespread physical resistance to conscription. There's a few anarchists that have like did some resistance stuff, but nothing on such a wide scale event to seriously undermine conscription efforts yet. Like some stuff that got attention in media, like some conscription offers being burnt out, but nothing that's having a demonstrable impact on the front.
What are your top 3 predictions each? Or ideas about 2024 and how to help Ukraine achieve their objectives? Whoever wants to go first.
Top 3?
No, top 3, or maybe no number, okay. Whatever you can.
It depends on who people are. Oh, sorry, you can go first.
No, sure. Number 1, the planes will make less impact than everyone is expecting. The planes that will start arriving to Ukraine, they will be in a low number, and they will not have the dominant impact that everyone is thinking, that Ukraine instantly shifts to the NATO-defined strategy and will dominate the sky. Which ties into the second part. I believe that the year will be, in general, more active on the front lines with regards to attacks, shootings, drone operations, strikes, casualties. But it will be less active with regards to movements of the front line. I believe it would be for Ukraine a year to prepare, to relearn what they were needed to do. Potentially there will be an attempt if they will have resources. But, and which ties to the third one, if there is no resources, then there is nothing that's going to happen in 2024. So, and this ties into US support, and that's why I think it's crucial. If there is US support, there's a good chance that Ukraine has learned their lessons. And if they have resources, if they have air power, there's a good potential that they can really, really achieve a lot. Because already now, with especially downing with the A-50, with knowingly eroding Russian anti-air defense, it just opens a huge window of opportunity for the air assets to actually show up and be valuable. But it does not happen on its own. Like planes arriving on its own will not make this change happen. It needs to be a combined resource-intensive effort.
There was like 2 lines of questioning. It was like one was like predictions, and the other was like, what can we do to help? As an American, right? The first thing I could tell you is call your congressperson. We, as American people, are not that directly interested in foreign policy as much as we should be, considering the amount of influence we have on the world stage. We have more influence on the world stage than any other nation on the planet. We have the world's largest amount of reserve currency. It's 59%. It's the U.S. greenback dollar. And as much as BRICS like to talk a talk, they haven't put forward a competitor. We have trade allies all around the world. We have so much influence. We have bases everywhere. What our government looks like has a real impact on how we interact with the rest of the world. And so I think Americans need to make foreign policy more of a priority when they're choosing who goes in the public office and who gets put in there, who doesn't get put in there, who you vote for, who you don't vote for, and what you answer when pollsters ask you and you say, what's your priority? Because the more pollsters come back and say, people care about this, the more politicians pay attention to it. So I would say that one thing Americans need to do, period, is just get generally more interested, and I know this is a big ask, generally more interested in foreign policy. Answer pollsters that your biggest issue is foreign policy. Answer to pollsters that your biggest issue is stuff like Ukraine, and get more people informed about these issues as possible. Like, I think raising general awareness about our involvement in the world is good. This is very broad, but I'm trying to keep it broad so people can try to impact it in their own way. You know, if you know a lot about Somalia, try to bring more knowledge in America about Somalia. Know a lot about Ukraine, try to bring that. Get the idea. Second thing we can do, and I'm just going to be blunt, get Joe Biden reelected. No matter what, American aid is safer, and American support for Ukraine is safer under a Joe Biden administration. Even under the most far right wing plan of just waiting until Trump wins, we're just going to hold on to aid for a year. Let's say American aid doesn't get set until after Biden gets reelected. Even in that scenario, the far-right strategy is just wait for Trump to win. They don't have no plan if Trump loses. If Trump loses, then it's just wait another fucking 4 years until Trump runs again or he dies, whichever one comes first, right? So I would say making sure that the person in the White House, who's the head of the armed forces, who's the chief executive, supports Ukraine. I think that's incredibly important. And that's something you can do. You can go out and vote, and you can go out and volunteer to try to get them elected. That's my opinion. People don't need to agree with me. People can disagree with me. If Joe Biden's the right candidate, you can be a Nikki Haley stan if you want to. You believe whatever you want to believe. But that's my opinion. A third thing that I think Americans or people in the world can do to support Ukraine is make more financial contributions to Ukrainian-based charities, Ukrainian-based NGOs, Ukrainian-based rescue workers, Ukrainian-based organizations like UA Animals, Renegade Runners, and the people on the ground still doing work. The amount of interest in Ukraine has tremendously decreased when it comes to social media interactions and when it comes to how people interact with these charities. The amount of money they're making now is so much less than they used to. But that doesn't mean that the needs have gone down. The needs have not gone down at all. And so they still need those contributions. So if you want, I would recommend making a few recurring, and I would say recurring so these people can plan into the future, recurring donations to NGOs doing work that you care about. If you care about animals, donate to UA Animals. If you care about making aid runs, maybe help out the Renegade Runners. If you just want to do military stuff, I know Degas Paul does a lot of stuff to raise money for drones and body armor for soldiers. But make recurring donations so these groups can plan into the future and show that solidarity. So those are three things that people can do. As for predictions, this is going to be a year of active defense. This is going to be a year of active defense. We're not going to see the Ukrainians attempt any major breakthroughs. They'll maybe attempt some like shifting of the front positional advances, but they're probably not going to launch any big attempts at a breakthrough. And if they did, it would be probably way at the end of the year. And even that, many analysts would say would probably be too early to when the aid would be coming in that would be necessary for them to actually start these types of operations. If we are able to give them the aid necessary to conduct these types of operations, which I hope we do. So I would say, for one, it's going to be a year of active defense. And it seems and I've been saying this for a while, and Zelensky just recently basically came out and said it. So they've changed to this position of active defense. So probably it's going to look very similar to how our good Danish friend put it. Besides that, what else? I don't really have many other predictions. I try not to predict the future because I don't want to look like Tim Pool or Hassan or all these people who make just like crazy predictions, and then I just don't want to look like that. So I'll just make the one prediction that I'm very confident in, and that's the active defense.
Yeah. Also, with regards to supporting Ukraine, Andrew, are you by any chance running any campaign right now? Because we just finished 2 more trucks for NAFO, and we just kind of done. Right now we're in a mid period, but are you doing anything?
Yeah, I was going to launch my next campaign on Monday. So actually, I'm breaking that now. New campaign, new patch, truck, and 10 drones, FPVs. Cool. So we're doing a truck and 10 FPVs, new patch. It's coming. It's already built. But I want to push it out because I have a video that I'm going to put out next week from when I actually, ironically, went to hostile animal shelter with Rick the Ukrainian. And I did some reporting about it, and I want to attach that to it. You know, I think it'd be a good opportunity. And then, yeah, so. Stuff's coming for me.
Perfect. Yeah. So, guys, whoever asked the chat, because there were a couple of questions asking that I should do a separate stream on helping Ukraine. There is no need for separate stream, guys. Everyone on this panel, in one way or another, always helping Ukraine. They're participating in some kind of activities, and we're always asking and so on. So the only thing that you need to do is maybe subscribe to these channels, follow what we're doing, and at some point there is campaign. And the best part, for example, I don't know for Dylan if he does this or not, but he can tell it, is I know that Andrew and myself, we are working with, for example, NAFO 69 Sniffing Brigade and some of the other producers that are delivering the goods specifically to the army units. So we are cutting a lot of that red tape away. We're not requiring a lot of administrative costs, which you get necessity to be paid for when you're donating to bigger charities. There's nothing wrong with donating to charities. It's all fine. But if you want to be cost effective, help as much as you can, then the best way is, as I said, Andrew, myself, and I don't know, Dylan, do you do anything?
You know,
directly?
Yeah, I've done like a few like directing people towards fundraisers. When it comes to like NAFO stuff or anything that's like directly raising military funds, as a journalist, it's very difficult for me to figure out exactly how to align myself with supporting Ukraine the best way I can, while also presenting myself as, you know, a semi-impartial journalist who's not directly getting involved in hostilities. So I try to focus mostly on humanitarian aid, and if I do anything else, not saying that I do, I just don't do it on stream. So I try to keep most of my stuff off stream, but the stuff I do personally, but I do direct people towards fundraisers. I do that. I directed people towards a drone fundraiser that a buddy of mine, which I still think is on my Twitter account, their unit's trying to raise a drone. I direct people towards stuff like that. So yeah, I do
my
that
stuff too as well. You directed people to mine before. Yep.
Yeah, I can just call out a constant viewer and a friend also that wrote me a couple of times and so on. Yeah, he started this initiative. It's called Tridents Against Tyrants, Secular Sakai, and he is doing specifically working with a lot of Ukrainian volunteers, and like that's his. He doesn't really have any kind of big platform or anything, but he's doing something. I'm gonna leave a couple of links in chat if you're interested into this.
Yeah, shout out to Secular Sakai. I know him. He's on my community as well, so you could look into that.
Hey, Mercado. Yeah, I know you got pretty done in by YouTube and, you know, that guy. What do I got to do here to please the YouTube god so that I could get?
Yes. Dylan, I put it out on my stream yesterday about you, and you're still demonetized.
Yeah.
So, I would listen. Do you have memberships on your YouTube channel? Can you still do those?
No, I've
They took those away or what?
No, they took them away 4 months ago.
Oh my god,
dude, I've been demonetized for 4 months. And this, if you want I'll try to give you the story as fast as possible. So originally they just gave me demonetized me, say it was for harassment, and they took $3,500, which I had already made an advertisement, which they were going to give me in the YouTube check in 3 days, and they froze it, and then they gave it back to all the companies. So for the ads that had already been run, they gave them back $3,500. And then they demonetized me for 4 months, which I did the math on potential revenue. It probably cost me between like $7,000 to $10,000. And now this new 3 months extension will cost me another 3 to 4 to 5 in potential revenue. It's pretty awful, but you know, I don't know what else to do except to just wait, and eventually they'll decide that I deserve to make money. That's all I know what to do.
You still have your people subscribe to your Twitch channel?
People subscribe on my website, DylanBurns.tv. People have been subbing there. People have been supporting on Patreon. But you know, all of it was like to get us through to a certain point, because you know the YouTube ad revenue is important. Yeah. It's not just covering my own expenses. I have people who work for me. And so what I'm doing is I'm paying what they used to be paid was as a percentage. They would get a percentage out of the YouTube check. Obviously, I'm not going to have them work for nothing. So now I'm just paying them out of pocket while we're making nothing. And I mean, it's an expense that brings in zero revenue. And I have to keep that going because I don't want to abandon my YouTube audience. That's a decent percentage of my audience. So the plan is to just wait another 3 months. After the second wave of demonetization. This one's for hateful conduct. The last one was for harassment. So I'm a bigot. Sorry if you didn't know that. So I just wait another 3 months, and hopefully next time they'll decide I should make money. That's the strategy now.
Been a concerning issue on YouTube. Channels getting demonetized, and lately it's in the community guidelines policies. Like I don't think I can play combat videos on my streams anymore at all. I think I just got to go through the news and then direct people to my Discord if they want to see the combat stuff now. I don't even have ads on. I don't have ad revenue or anything. It's all memberships and super chats when it happens, but memberships really are what carry my channel. So I don't really worry about ad revenue, but still, like, say I want to shift my focus to videos at some point, like I'm tired of streams. That's a concerning for me.
Yeah, the crazy thing is, it's my second channel. My second channel was the thing that made money. My main channel is where I do my journalism, and I'm like, I'll take an expense because this is what I care about. I think I've only made one journalistic piece that actually made me a profit, and it was the Hassan video, of course, because that's the one that got the views.
That one went big viral.
Yeah, it did go semi-viral. But that video, my main channel, which has the war footage, people getting hit, like civilians getting bombed and stuff, that's monetized. I can make money on all the videos of me getting bombed and almost killed. I can't make money about me talking about like the Russian egg crisis. I have no idea why. And that's the thing that scares me the most about it, is just so random. And then they're in YouTube communication so awful. You can't call like a phone line.
No, there's nobody to talk to. Even Johnny FD, who had a person when I was going through my shit, and he said, hey, I got like a direct line to someone, and they were just like, oh, here's how you can improve your revenue on shorts for the next month, basically. I'm like, and Johnny was like, what the fuck, dude? Like, no, I asked for help, like for a friend. And they were just basically were trying to help him grow his revenue on his channel. Like,
it's a lot of it's automated responses, man.
Yeah, it's automated stuff, but it wasn't anything. So even with the personal person, there's no help for you. You got to like hope and pray. The best thing you guys can do for my community is, since you guys, we talk with Dylan every Friday, is at Team YouTube and YouTube creators on X. If you have that platform still, if you're still surviving on there, you can retweet Dylan's tweet about it, maybe get their attention.
Yeah, since I was already demonetized for harassment, go engage in some harassment. Go harass YouTube.
Go harass YouTube on X.
What are they gonna do? Demonetize me again?
Well, you just said it on my stream, so I guess I'm.
I was joking. This was a joke, YouTube.
Yeah, it takes us down with them.
Yes, just. I mean,
if I'm going, I'm taking them with me.